Hi, everyone. Welcome. Today is July 10, 2025. This is the Valley Alliance of Neighborhood Councils. I'm your chair, Linda Gravani, and I'd like to welcome you all to our meeting this evening. We're going to be discussing the recent elections, and I definitely would like to hear feedback on how it went. Both from the side of City Clerk and Dunn, as well as the side from the neighborhood councils. So welcome. On number two, candidates, I see Tim is coming on in. Hi, Tim, welcome. We're on number two already, so would you chat with us for a second and tell us about yourself?
Was that directed at me? I apologize. My audio.
Yes. No worries.
My apologies. Hi, everyone. My name is Tim Gaspar. I'm running for LA City Council for CD3. I might have spoken to a few of you before. For those that I have not met before, nice to meet you. I was born and raised in the Valley. I've been building an insurance agency for the past 17 or 18 years. I built it to the second largest agency in the Valley, and I sold it at the end of 2021. I had to work there for a few more years. That was part of the deal with the buyer before officially retiring about 3 months ago. And while I was building the agency, I've been someone who participates quite a bit with the YMCA, the Boys and Girls Club, the Discovery Cube, and so more. So anything that benefits the youth, anything that supports small business is really where my heart is. And so one of the reasons that I had sold the business and looked to leave the business world was to have as much impact as possible within the San Fernando Valley. And that's why I'm pursuing the city council seat. And so Bob Blumenfield has endorsed me, as has John Lee and Tim McCosker. And that's fantastic. And I feel really blessed for that to be the case. But that's not really the thing I would want to stress most, because although I've gotten the endorsements of some of the existing political folks, as a political outsider, I'm someone that really wants to change a number of the things that we have going on right now in the city of Los Angeles. We need to do a lot of things different. My priorities, real quickly, I know I only have a couple of minutes, are safety, number one, addressing the homelessness crisis, number two, supporting small business, number three, and investing in youth, number four. I don't have time tonight to go into each one of those, but I do have a detailed plan for each one, and would love the opportunity to speak to anyone here one-on-one. If you want to reach out, I would love to grab coffee with you, or whatever you think an appropriate venue is. The last thing I'll mention real quickly, I have two meetings I've set up for in the near future. The end of July, I'm hosting a meeting with a bilingual immigration attorney to focus on the ICE raids, just for community members to be able to ask questions and have questions answered, be able to get some of their concerns answered with someone that really knows the law well. And then a week after that, in the beginning of August, I'm doing a sidewalk symposium. The sidewalks are something I hear about a lot in the district, and the city has a 30-year backlog, so that's not going to work. So we have to do things differently, and I have some ideas on how to do that, and would love to get feedback from the public. Right? And that's it.
Feel free to put your website and anything else in the chat to everyone if you wish.
Awesome. I appreciate that, Glenn. Thank you.
And also, I see that you are part of the Valley Economic Alliance.
That's right.
Very good. Thank you.
And like that. Thank you.
Thank you. Assad, do you want to give us a little rundown on who you are?
Yes.
Not that we don't know you.
Hi, Linda. Hi, Glenn. Hi, good evening, everybody. This is Assad Al-Najjar, your 44th LA mayor, once I win the elections in June 2nd. I am, as many of you know, part of the city of Los Angeles. I'm a senior engineer manager, and at the same time, I'm part of the NC system. My time frame, a lot of my items that I would like to do evolves about really empowering Empower LA and empowering the neighborhood councils. I feel the past 25 years, we reached the point where we are not only 6 feet under, but 8 feet under. And my first action item, once I swear in the office, is to get all the 99 neighborhood councils empowered. We cannot take this anymore. We were established to serve Angelenos. We're established to restore safety, to restore businesses, to support our youth, and change is imminent. We cannot afford all these mishaps because of the current administration and their staff that has no knowledge. The staff is selected not based on merits. Maybe I sound too strong here, but I'm speaking as an Angelino who's frustrated and worried where my two daughters will end when they get married and raise families in Los Angeles. That's why I'm running. I'm running for change. I'm running to re-engineer and rebuild the city of LA. And given I'm a civil structural engineer, foundation will be designed in a way in which we all as Angelenos will come together. We have a lot of knowledge. We have a lot of experience. And, all this mess that we've seen in 2025 would not have happened on my watch. This ice would not even had dared to step a foot in Los Angeles. And the fires, I would have stopped them before even they happen. I will be sharing with you along the line a lot of my issues and my items on my website. But I would like to hear from you. My action plan is dynamic. So basically, it evolves on what I hear from you so that I can do some on it. Like right now, I'm working very hard to resolve the issues coming on us with SB 79. With that said, I don't want to take more time and looking forward to jointly work with you so that we fix the city once for all.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Okay, we're on to number 3 already. Neighborhood council elections. How did it go? So Department of Neighborhood Empowerment, Mary Lou is here this evening. Carmen is not able to attend, so you're more than welcome, Mary Lou, to tell us how everything went on your side, working the elections, and then we'll be chatting with some of the folks that had some concerns or issues.
Sure. Well, thank you so much, Linda, and early evening. Good evening to everyone. Great to see you all. Many of you I engage with on a regular basis. A lot of you are new faces, so look forward to working with you closer as the year progresses. So I can speak to, I'll get into, thank you so much for breaking down categories. That was very helpful. And I hope to tackle all of them. I want to say that elections, many of you who may not know me, I'm relatively new to the department. This was my first election season. I look forward to the post debrief, and even after today's meeting, if you have any feedback, I am all ears on how we can improve this process, because no matter how great things are, in some areas, there's always room for improvement. So with that said, I'll get right into our outreach for candidates. I think what worked well, and then I'll talk about what can be improved and build on. What worked well is obviously, we had a website with tools for candidates that we know was utilized, because we saw about 27,000 visits to it. I think we did candidate engagement 101 workshops, which many of you attended. We did a total of 7 sessions. We had about 340 registrations. Obviously, building on that, the number should be much higher. So there are ways that we need to improve the promotion of those, and the timeline of when we offer those. Candidate engagement, we created a guide, which is still available on our website. Our elections website is still up. for anybody looking for post information that will direct them to the office of the city clerk. So we created a guide. It took some work. But it was the first time. It's not too comprehensive. It's user friendly, but building on that is something that we need to definitely do. Obviously, Canva, we utilize it to its maximum potential. Something that I wanted to make sure to do is to create ready to go templates. So I think many of you might have seen that you received your flyers and your templates with your logos already, branded with your colors. I think that's something that I was very mindful and very intentful about, looking at creating materials that took really into consideration the identity of the neighborhood council and its own branding, that were personalized and really distinguished it from the other neighborhood councils that were having elections. So we did a total of 212 personalized outreach flyers. And we did a series of graphics that were available for download and that I also emailed out throughout the candidate recruitment cycle. Obviously, working with the Office of the City Clerk, kudos to them. We were able to distribute a lot of hard copy materials, not only to meetings, but also at events. Door hangers was something that we printed in-house and made available. Hoping to build on that and find a way that we can make that available and make that with the neighborhood council's logo and be able to provide templates so that there could be some personalization that also translates to that. Speaking of translation, we provided some in language material based on request, but obviously I think capacity is something that we need to improve on in terms of language accessibility across all of our outreach materials, really taking a look at and working with you all on what languages you'd like to see materials in and being more mindful of that. So that's something that we need to do next in general, but definitely during the election cycle. We utilize the ENS email system to email by region and by deadline. I think using that strategic, we don't want to overload and overuse those lists, but trying to balance that a bit more and trying to make sure that people receive notifications on time. And I think that our email announcements were very successful. We had about a 70% open rate on our emails that were related to elections. I can tell you that we probably sent out over 100 dedicated election-related emails. I think we're still counting how many. Last count was 95, but I know there's more. In terms of what we could improve, I've been talking about it. I think our website, I know we had some increased traffic, but I think it can definitely be more streamlined, more user-friendly. We need to definitely find ways to integrate different methodology into our outreach. We focused a lot heavily on online because, that's where our capacity was, and being one of two people that leads this work. Obviously, it's all hands on deck, but you're talking to the person that does most of this along with the PIO. I think finding ways to partner with community-based partners. Obviously, you all are great messengers, trusted messengers in your community. Um, in between elections, doing a lot of this work so that when it comes to election time, it's more organic and it takes less capacity. I think in terms of the results, we had 21 versus, and I think Michael will speak to this, versus 32 board affirmations, which we had last election cycle. So we did strategically recruit more candidates throughout some regions to lessen the number of board affirmations. Overall, we saw 7 of the 12 regions saw an increase in the number of candidates. I want to say that all 4 regions in the Valley had an increase in candidates. So but I can't take credit for that. You all did a lot on your end. In terms of the outreach for voters, I think our website was, great. Obviously the same improvements apply that I just mentioned. Canva was also great. Social media, I think, was critical when it pertained to outreach to voters, more so than with candidates. We obviously need to streamline our messaging for voters. I think, um, fully transparent, I think the messaging for voters is much harder when it comes to outreach because each neighborhood council can have its own requirements on eligibility and type of seats. So refining and being efficient with our messaging is key for next election cycle. Because as for people that may not know about neighborhood councils or neighborhood councils elections, um, it can be quite a complex process voting, but it could also be quite a complex process in terms of understanding the eligibility and the messaging that it takes to vote. So us who do the outreach need to find ways to simplify that messaging and make it easy to understand, even if the process doesn't change. Um, Obviously we also utilized ENS. We did a lot of get out the vote events with neighborhood councils. We did 49 events during the election cycle. About half of those were with neighborhood councils. We sent regional email notices to voters a week before election day to remind them to send in their ballot. Working with the Office of the City Clerk, who provided us the list of voters who had requested ballots, we were able to strategically send out that messaging with a very kind of simple message, simple template. We think that it did improve the return rate, which ended up being about 60%. If you work elections, that's not a bad percentage, but obviously our universe of voters needs to grow. We did a lot of printed material. Had a lot of hands-on staff support this election cycle. I've heard more so than previous elections. A lot of our staff were accepting applications and working with election administrators to get documentation. We really focus on personalizing regional communication. Once again, I think that's key, not only for branding for neighborhood councils and setting them apart and distinguishing them, especially when so many neighborhood councils are staggered and having so many elections throughout many months. I think overall, the timeline is tight between candidate recruitment and voter recruitment. So I think things to improve for us, our next election cycle, is have some of this material prepped ahead of time. I think we've created a good framework this election cycle because we did a lot of new things that we haven't done in the past. So I'm crossing my fingers that for next election cycle, we don't start from zero. Right? We have a framework that we can go in and just update. Obviously, hopefully there are improvements, and we will probably have to reinvent the wheel in some areas. But at least we won't be starting from scratch, which we found ourselves doing a lot this time around, because we looked at things from a different point of view, from the previous director who did elections before me. Um, I'll be honest, the fires that happened in LA in January set us back quite a bit. Obviously, in the scheme of things, elections were not the most important thing in January. Everything else that was happening was. So the central area and South LA area neighborhood councils were directly impacted going into some of the valley elections, which is why we had some regional changes. I think we lost a bit of momentum during that time, rightly so. But next election cycle, hopefully we don't have to deal with anything like that. And we can continue building on partnerships that we hopefully build in between elections. Um, I will just say that in the Valley, 3 of the 4 regions did have an increase in the number of ballots that were returned. I know I'm kind of mentioning some of Michael's just kind of high level information, but I think it's relative to what I'm talking about because it's outreach. I think the only region where we need to focus our capacity everywhere, but Region 1 in the Northeast Valley, I think did not have numbers this election cycle. So we need to take a deeper dive into see what could have been done. Was it the method of outreach? But I think some highlights even in Region 1 is Pacoima and Foothill Trails did see an increase in their ballots, the number of ballots returned. So overall, I think 6 of the 12 neighborhood councils saw an increase. Even though I think overall the numbers, when you see the totals, they're not impressive. I think when we take a deeper dive, which our post-election report will, as I'm sure our partners at the city clerk will as well, we'll start to see, what was happening within each region and kind of get down to the granular. So overall, I think some things that worked is our staff was more engaged. I think early on we worked well with the Office of the City Clerk and we did a lot of trainings in-house. Michael led a lot of them. Our staff is really grateful to the Office of the City Clerk and particularly you, Michael, for the in-house training that we did. We took a more hands-on approach. I look forward to building that next election cycle. We created an election toolkit with resources that are on Google Drive, still available on our homepage. We emailed the entire neighborhood council system, probably too much. Did social press kits and all that, which, directly to connected our assets to social media. But I think overall, an area where we need to be innovative and make connections to is obviously media. And looking for messengers that take our message beyond, just regional. We need, kind of big messaging that sometimes costs money, which is we looked into some of that. It was really expensive, and we couldn't afford it. But we need to find ways to be innovative and see if those opportunities open up organically, hopefully, and obviously uplift the work that you all do in between elections, not just during election season, because that's really, I think, if I want to say, that's the bread and butter of all of this, right? If people know that there's a neighborhood council, and they're aware that the neighborhood council system exists, then when we engage with them for elections, we don't have to start from zero. It's more so just we don't even have to get the buy-in from them because they know your work. They know the impact. So that's going to be the focus before the next election cycle is really finding ways to uplift your work, to support you in doing that. And that's something that we obviously need to hone in on and focus on.
We also have that difficulty because mail outs, et cetera, are very expensive. And with our budget cuts and whatnot, we agree that it is difficult. Mary Lou, we do have several hands raised.
That was it. I think I'll stop there. Yeah.
Okay, very good. So we have a couple comments and suggestions. Joanne, you want to start us off and then Assad?
Sure, I have a few. First question, were the webmaster's email lists used for each neighborhood council? It didn't feel like it. Can you answer that, yes or no?
Let me make sure if I don't quite understand your question or answer it, let
Well,
me
if you
know,
go to the
Joanne.
webmaster, like Wendy Moore is one of the webmasters for
Sure.
many neighborhood councils. She maintains a list of a couple thousand people in our neighborhood council area. Was that list used to, yeah,
Sure. No,
that list,
no. I did collaborate with Wendy. But no, we don't have access to those lists, and I don't think that we can tap into them because when they sign up to receive messaging from you, not from the department.
well,
Um,
if you could create something that you give to Wendy, then,
that
because
we can do.
that list, we had a record low turnout. So I think we had something like 23 votes in our whole neighborhood council area. So that's down by a third from our record low previously. So I just think that that list is very important because those are people that know at least that there's a neighborhood council and would want to vote in the election. So there should be some offer to them to get a ballot, some link that they could use to get a ballot. Also, getting a ballot, I have to tell you, my husband, who does have a college degree, had such a hard time getting a ballot that I had to go help him. So I would suggest that however you set up giving out the ballots, whether it's you or the city clerk, test it. Test it on somebody that is not very, that doesn't know your system. Don't just take someone from your office, but take somebody, the person on the street kind of person, and say, request a ballot for this election. See if you can do it, and see if they run into any problems, because he did, and I had to straighten him out. But that's because I'm sort of on the inside, having done this for so many years. And quickly, there's we have a lot of different candidate slots, district slots, and at-large slots. And we need the neighborhood council to be able to describe the difference somehow on the ballot, because it's different with every neighborhood council. And we had a situation where people thought it was more important to represent a district than just be at large. And we had all these open at large seats, and we had these intense battles on the districts. And we only have, I think, 8 districts. And what happened is that we only elected 2 more than quorum. And we had all these people turned away, and because they didn't run for the at-large seats. So if we'd had an explanation that they were equal, that you could run for either, I mean, I made sure that there were some challenge spots, because otherwise we wouldn't have an election. So we don't want everybody to just find an empty slot. But at the same time, we need better communication as to what the different slots mean, because they actually are equal. And finally, as far as your media, I would suggest doing something with Spectrum One, because you probably can get something for free, and just start getting them excited about these neighborhood council elections, just for what it's worth.
Thank you, Joanne. I'll
Thank
be
you.
in touch with you.
Okay, thank you.
Assad and then Tony.
Yes. Well, welcome aboard to your new position, and hopefully this will be start of a better round of votes and ballots and all that. I echo on some of what Joanne said. I'm with the Porter Ranch Neighborhood Council, and our ballots and turn it's almost 20 people voted. We tried Facebook, we tried the email blast through Wendy Moore, but it seems there is a disconnect where the people don't want to be involved in the neighborhood council. So maybe along the line, we establish sort of a newsletter to bring out what is neighborhood councils, why established, and try to repeat the message maybe monthly to get people to be aware. So awareness is not there. For regards to the ballots, I guess I'll save it. We had a lot of issues with registering for the ballots, so I'll save it for the next one. But for you, can you please investigate what happened in Porter Ranch? And maybe we work with you so that the next cycle we have more candidates and more people voting. Welcome aboard. Thank you.
Thank you, Assad. I'll be in touch.
August and then Glenn, and then I think what we'll do is,
Help, not Tony.
sorry.
Tony seems to be ahead of me.
Yeah, sorry about that. Yes. I think we'll introduce the city clerk because I think there'll be extending questions between the two departments. So maybe that'll work better. Tony, then August, and then Glenn and Roy.
I want to thank Mary Lou for, this is the first time I've ever heard from the city, either the Department of Neighborhood Empowerment or the city clerk, a concern with the tightness of the timeline for recruiting candidates. One of the challenges is you guys are all downtown and the elected officials say, why aren't there more votes? Why aren't there more votes? There are tiny numbers of votes. And so somehow the idea has come in, the unrealistic idea from an advertising guy, that's one of my prior incarnations, the impossibility of advertising for votes on the scale where you have 250,000 people in the Northeast, in the San Fernando Valley. You know, it's just huge numbers of people. You can't reach those economically with the budget we have. There's an absolute tie-in between the number of candidates and whether you have competitive seats and the number of votes. What you really have to do is to get the candidates worried that they may not be elected, so they all run out. And if you have a competitive seat, two people recruiting for candidates against each other, that's how you can get the votes up. But we did get an extension from 30 days grudgingly to 45 days, but you take in order to recruit candidates, but take a look at how long it takes just to get recruiting candidates for the city election, for running for city council, months and months and months and months. So early starts, even like it wouldn't, 60 days would not be too much. 90 days would not be too much. The thing is, you got to spend lots of time recruiting those candidates and then give the candidates an adequate amount of time to recruit voters. But frankly, from the day that they register, they can be recruiting voters. And I hope we have in-person elections. That really was a real problem for us in the Northeast Valley. We have a lot of people who aren't into, online voting kinds of stuff or ballot requests, but they'll show up at the polls. But at any rate, I think that we can address this by getting more competitive elections and all those. And in terms of advertising, the aging Anglos who say, why am I supposed to recruit for my replacement? Those neighborhood councils should be targeted by both the department and the clerk for massive assistance recruiting for candidates, because if they refuse to do it, we'll flood the zone and do it for them. And the rest of them, let's all remember that it's our responsibility to recruit our own candidates. So we need to do that and not say it's up to the city clerk or the department. Thank you.
Thank you, August, and then Glenn.
Yeah, thank you. I disagree with some of the premises that I don't think Dunn should be responsible for recruiting candidates and advertising the election. I think that responsibility needs to be focused on the individual neighborhood councils. And I realize the challenge is that most neighborhood councils don't have trained outreach committees or in-house webmasters that are capable of adequately running communications with the stakeholders. And the other thing is that the process needs to start at least a year ahead of time. And you need to get the stakeholders onto engaged, which is what we're supposed to do, engage them to get them on committees so that they know what the hell they're getting into. Because the current process of cold calling candidates who have no idea what a neighborhood council is or does, when they come to their first meeting, they get scared to death, and within 3 months, they resign. That is not the way to run a functioning system. Then you end up appointing and all the other things. You get much better candidates if they come from having worked on a committee. I've been at this for 20 years. I have seen where the good candidates come from and where the flakes come from. And it's always, and the problem is you don't have the budget anymore to do substantive communication every month, week in, week out. And technology has gotten much more sophisticated, and we're competing with dozens and dozens of influencers and everything else on YouTube. So it's very difficult to get out our message, but Dunn needs to focus on training neighborhood councils to be excellent marketers. And my personal opinion is marketing is not what the city knows. And it's a big challenge for Dunn to do that role by themselves, because there's a lot of handicaps within the city that prevent departments from really doing marketing and engaging stakeholders. There's a lot to be fixed, and some of it is radical. Thank you.
Thank you, Glenn, and then Roy.
So Mary Lou, thank you for being here, and thanks for all the energy and effort you put into this. I know you're, a one-person army with a little bit of, I appreciate that. So I'm going to try to meld in all the outreach things, okay, to one. So first of all, I'm glad that you re-looked at things. I'm a little bit disappointed that there, and I can't point anything in particular, but we've been doing this. The department, Neighbor Empowerment, has had the outreach component. Even when they had the elections, they had the outreach component, and it's for the citywide part. I am glad, though, that you threw out the previous model of paying money to community-based organizations, giving them $5,000 for this group, because that really didn't generate. I'd rather have the same result and not pay out the money to groups, some of which did minimal outreach. I mean, anyway, that's just, so if that was part of the, throw out the old and look at it new, that's great. I want to commend you for really working the early notification system. There are tens of thousands of folks who have signed up to receive the neighbor council agendas. Some neighbor councils have 400 or 500 people who've signed up for that. And so those are people who really care enough about the neighbor council to actually get the agendas. So with that thought in mind, because 2 years ago, the notice came out, I think like the last day to file. So, someone who's considering filing or hadn't even thought about filing, that's too late. So I appreciate you getting them out earlier. I still think they need to get out the day the filing opens. I think there needs to be several reminders and then, a final reminder before it closes. I realize that's not the be all end all, but it's truly the folks who at least have, and the last number I saw again was tens of thousands citywide. Secondly, most neighbor councils did not put the election information on their board meeting agendas. And that's really, in my opinion, inexcusable. Some did, but take a look see how many of them put it on the agenda with a link to the city clerk to file, or with a link to your website to get more information from the first day it was available, even before candidate filing opened. Right, and then put on there the deadlines for, in this case, vote by mail, which hopefully it won't be an all vote by mail again. All those deadlines, all that information. It's just part of the puzzle, because however many hundreds of people see the agenda, even if they don't show up up at the meeting. I also want to commend you for doing your next door post. Yes, the individual neighbor councils can do it, but the fact is that many do not. In fact, unfortunately, many neighbor councils haven't even, they've let their next door lapse, or they've never activated it, reactivated it, anyway. So by having the department, people saying, well, the department shouldn't, the fact is the department can reach out to every member of next door on a regional basis, which is, it's great to do the whole neighbor council, but the whole region has the same deadlines, et cetera. And we're now at about a 33% penetration rate. That's over 1 million different households throughout the city that get the next door queue collectively of all of them. So I think that's another piece of the puzzle that's, I think, pretty important. The webmasters have been mentioned. Yes, that needs to really be moved up as a priority. It's inexcusable. I saw websites of neighbor councils that didn't even put the election on their own website. Now, and they send out e-blasts. There should be an e-blast, and I'm only speaking to those who didn't do it, right? And I don't have a list, and I haven't correlated that with the outcomes. But the fact is, they send out newsletters, weekly blasts, whatever. It should be, the candidate filing is now open. It should be part of the regular calendar. Here's the deadline for it, featured on the website, etc. Why there's a disconnect, I don't know, but I think the department could really be helpful. And if you have to really work the neighbor council to get that, I just think, especially these webmasters that have multiple neighbor councils, I realize it's gonna be more difficult on the ones that's like one individual or a volunteer with the neighbor council. But the webmasters that have 10 or 20 neighbor councils, they'll have to tailor it based on particular regions. Last thing, thank you for the regional meetings. I know that was a partnership between the department and city clerk. And I know you had several candidate information, et cetera, but the ones that were focused on the actual regions where it was specifically targeted for those neighbor councils in that region. I believe one of them was held like the day before candidate filing opened, or certainly that same week. And it was in January. I mean, really the funding, such as it was, but the funding started in July. And it really seems to me that we should try to get the regions really up and working much earlier than the day or a week before candidate filing opens. I mean, yes, we could all take the initiative ourselves and work together on the region, but I really think the department could make sure if it's not happening organically, then you can help move that along. But it really needs to start 6 months earlier. Thank you.
Thank you, Roy. And then we're going, go ahead, Roy.
All right, I don't have a lot to say. I think from an outreach perspective, the biggest, first of all, I want to thank you guys. You guys were so responsive and so helpful throughout the entire process with the elections. And I really noticed it and I really appreciated all of that. But I think the problem we have from an outreach perspective is 99% of the people that you say neighborhood council to still have no idea what that is. And that is the biggest problem. So the outreach for 2 years from now needs to start today. Like that's when that needs to start happening so that people know what neighborhood councils are. And it's not this like people think it's an HOA or something like that. So I think that's it. And I want to mention a huge problem that we had in the election. We had a candidate that filed that was approved. Her photo and candidate statement were on the website. And then suddenly one day it was gone and no one understood why. And we found out that there was a problem with paperwork and they had emailed her twice. It went to spam. She never knew about it until it was too late. Nobody ever tried to call her. They just sent 2 emails and that was it. And what ended up happening is that was a contested race that because she was removed, it became an uncontested race. And so, we now have somebody that maybe would not have been elected if this didn't happen. And so I want to encourage you guys when something like that comes up, you guys should call the person. If you've emailed them and you haven't heard back, maybe you guys ought to call them. And maybe you shouldn't make it seem as if they are approved by putting their candidate statement and their photo on the website and then removing it later mysteriously, and nobody understands why. We may not have even known at all had I not noticed it when I was looking. I don't know what I was looking for, but I caught it and I was like, what happened to her? What happened to her statement? What happened to her photo? And we found out. But I would encourage you guys to, don't just rely on email, because, sometimes things go to spam, and that's what happened. And we lost a really good candidate because of it. That's
So
all.
Ken and Anna, I'm going to hold you off for just a moment, please. I'd like to introduce Michael and Sophia, and they can give us a little update, because I think a lot of the comments are going to cross over between city clerk and Dunn. I didn't do that quite right. So Sophia and Michael, you want to introduce yourselves and give us a little background on how things went on your end?
Sure. Good evening, everybody. My name's Sofia Anguiano. I oversee neighborhood council elections and funding. And I'm here with my colleague, Mike Lecterich, who oversees the neighborhood council elections. Mike will go into all the details and numbers about how the elections went, but I did want to address a couple of points that were brought up. Roy, I'm sorry about that candidate. We should have sent communication to the entire board, giving an update on that particular candidate. In terms of making phone calls, we always call candidates. We not only email, but we also call. We have a 2-call requirement, so we'll look into that. That should have never happened. I'm sorry that happened. In terms of the election schedule, we're looking at that. That we shift the regions every so often. So we'll be looking at that. Again, we're going to be preparing our budget for the next neighborhood council election cycle in the fall. And in that budget, we do propose to offer the in-person voting all over again. So again, we're going to ask for all of your support when we present it before council, in hopes that they fund us for not only in person, but also vote by mail. So we'll, wish us luck on that. We'll see how it goes. I agree. We need more participation in the neighborhood council system. But I got to be 100% honest with you. I've been in the neighborhood council election business for many, many years, and I still scratch my head on what these qualifications are to run and vote. They're not easy. They're so complicated, so much so that I think if I were just a non-participating member of the public, I wouldn't want to participate, because there are so many requirements to participate. We're looking at, we respect your bylaws, we enforce them, but it ain't easy. That's all I'm saying. So, we are taking a look at the bylaws for stuff that we're truly very unsure of what they mean. We're raising them with Dunn in hopes that they can work with each board. A lot of the time, the boards don't even read the election qualifications, so they themselves can't even provide us clarification. So this is the time, the off election season, where you could look at your bylaws. How can you be more inclusive to allow for more people to participate? Because it's not easy. It really isn't. So that's my spiel about that. And I guess I'll let it go to Mike.
All right. Thanks, Sophia. Good evening, everybody. Thanks for having us. So I'm Michael Lecterich. I'm a senior election administrator with the Office of the City Clerk. As everyone knows, the city clerk was provided funding to conduct an all vote by mail election for neighborhood councils in 2025. So I'm really going to kind of break it down by the process and really just focus on the Valley stats, which I think kind of speak to a lot of the successes and some areas that need improvement. And then I'll go into what we're looking at for the future. So the first step is candidate filing. In 2025, we received 429 applications for the Valley. Of those applications, 387 became certified candidates. This is an increase of 75 certified candidates over 2023 neighborhood council election cycle. All 4 regions did have an increase in the number of certified candidates, which is great. 21 neighborhood councils across the city did not trigger an election and went through the board affirmation process. Of those 21, 9 were in the Valley that went through the board affirmation process. That's Mission Hills, North Hills East, Granada Hills North, Granada Hills South, Northridge East, Sun Valley area, Sylmar, North Hollywood Northeast, and North Hollywood West. The good thing to note about these board affirmations that is different because it is also a decrease from the 18 neighborhood councils that went through board affirmation in 2023. These neighborhood councils, while they did not trigger an election, they did meet quorum, which was not the case for all of the NCs that had board affirmation in 2023, which creates a lot more work because then you have to recruit even more candidates to even meet quorum. So that's candidate filing. Now going into vote by mail. What we did this election season, because like Sophia's mentioning, with neighborhood councils, it gets very complicated for the average stakeholder to know what the process is, how they have to register, what's needed, if there's documentation, things like that. So we had staff attend events to try to help stakeholders through completing candidate filing application and or a vote by mail application. And so in the Valley, we attended over 50 events where we were able to assist stakeholders. In the Valley, the city clerk's office received 3,698 vote by mail applications. Of those, we were able to mail out 252 ballot packets to voters. And so the reason for the applications that we were not able to process and send out a ballot packet is the three main reasons that we saw in the Valley is due to missing documentation or information. So even in self-affirmation, we see it all the time where there's not enough information to be able to process those applications. There could be duplicate applications, and there are oftentimes that we will receive applications where those voters are not eligible to vote. For example, there's certain NCs where only some areas are up for election. So we might see many applications for those areas that are not up for election, and that factors into those numbers. So from those 3,252 ballot packets that we mailed out, we received 1,995 voted ballots returned, which were included in the tally. This is a 61% return rate for the Valley. We do recognize that there's an issue with USPS, and so that could kind of conflict, but anytime we had stakeholders reach out to us stating that they did not receive their ballot, or maybe there's even the confusion of they received the wrong ballot, we worked with those stakeholders and oftentimes even tried to deliver ballots if possible. So we understood the difficulty when we have all vote by mail. And so we tried to compete with that sometimes. Of the 21 neighborhood councils who had an election this season, 12 had an increase in voter turnout from 2023. We did partner with Rec and Park and library locations to have ballot boxes available inside of those locations. We received 65 ballots via the ballot boxes in the Valley. And so just as I get this question often, how many ballots have we received that we were not able to include in the tally? So in the Valley, in the 4 regions, we only received 35 vote by mail ballots or envelopes that were either incomplete, let's say missing a signature, or they were mailed after the postmark date. So those were not able to be included into the tally. So that's vote by mail. Regarding election day challenges, we received 5 election day challenges in the Valley, which were reviewed by the independent grievance panel. Those for the Valley were dismissed. So now I want to talk a little bit about the future election seasons. The Office of the City Clerk, we always are trying to improve the process. It's a difficult process, we understand, because there's 99 different bylaws, 99 different rules, but we want to try to always improve, get better. So what we did was we created a neighborhood council election survey to receive some feedback on how this election season worked. And then also, we're hoping to get some input on future election seasons, because we're pretty sure that we're still going to have budget constraints. But we want to really try to provide in-person elections because we're very aware that a big component of these elections is that in-person assistance is needed to help voters through the process and help them immediately. So in order to do that, we want to be able to provide that and have to deal with some of those budget constraints. So let's see, I kind of skipped ahead a little bit. But we also, like Sophia mentioned, we've been reviewing all of the bylaws, trying to catch any discrepancies we have found that have caused some difficulty throughout the election season. Sometimes those are simple, like a seat name might be different in Article 5 versus what it is in Attachment B. Sometimes it's transposed candidate or voter qualifications. We've also just been dealing with, I know a few of you here, the intention of the bylaw is not how it's written. So we want to work together to see that it's written well so that we can, everybody's on the same page of how to execute that. And so we will be sending that to Dunn later this month so that we can start working on that. And your election administrator is always available to also help you through if you have any questions about that. As Sophia mentioned as well, so we've kept the same election region schedule for the last 2 years. And so we keep that for 2 years, which means in 2027, we're going to be changing that cycle. We haven't looked at what it will be, but I will state, so the Valley's been at the end for the last 2 cycles. So that's going to be changed in the upcoming elections. I know that I tend to throw out a lot of information at these meetings and I throw it out fast. So I'm happy to answer any questions, but I'm also available if you have any questions at any time. You can email me at michaellectrich.lacity.org or call me at 213-978-044. I'll put my contact info in the chat. So with that, that's it.
Sorry about that. I lost the connection. And when I came back on, I was muted. So I apologize. So we can have questions for Mary Lou, for Sophia, or for Michael, whatever might pop into your head as you continue on.
Linda,
Roy-
Mike Benedetto notified me he can't raise his Zoom hand, so just put him in the queue, please.
Okay, will do, Mike. Roy, and then Anna.
Just a brief comment because it came up. The ballot boxes that were in the libraries and parks, I only saw one of them. And yeah, if you had paid me $1,000, I couldn't have told you that that was a ballot box from neighborhood council because it did not have any indication on it that it was for neighborhood council or that it was even a ballot box. It was a box with a slit in it, and nobody could have known that. So I don't know if they were all like that or not, but the one in the Encino Community Center was definitely like that. And I don't think it's a big needle mover. I don't think a lot of people are going to the park or library to submit their ballots that way, but just something, if you're going to go through the trouble of putting a box there, make it clear what that is.
Yeah, we definitely need to work on making sure that all of those are, they should all be labeled, but I was aware that not all of them were. But so I definitely know if we do that in the future, we want to make sure that it's very apparent.
Thank you. Anna?
I kind of support Michael in doing the in-person elections for a couple of reasons. Our neighborhood council did not elect a election committee, which was kind of pathetic. And then our outreach committee was not functioning. That would be the next avenue. It was not functioning. I don't think it was on our website. And one of the problems I see with mail-in ballots is to initiate it, you have to get the ballot. And once you get, to register, once you get the registration sheet, you have to provide an envelope and stamps. Now, people who are on limited income, and I know that this happens, do not want to put out a little bit of money, even less than $1, to put a stamp and get an envelope. So they're not going to do it. And so therefore, our elections were really pathetic. If you go to our page and see how many people voted, hardly anybody. You only needed one vote to get a position. Thank you.
So it's postage paid, so they wouldn't have had to have paid to mail their ballot.
No, not the ballot. I'm saying to send in the registration form. You had to provide an envelope and a stamp. Is that not correct?
Yeah, that's correct. They could have also applied online.
Well, older people don't know how to do online. Thank you.
Thank you. Ken and then Tony.
Hi, this isn't directed for anybody specifically, but just in general, a complete frustration about the whole outreach program. I agree totally with Roy that nobody knows what a neighborhood council is, and if they happen to know what it is, they certainly don't know where theirs is or how to get in touch with them, and they don't really have a reason to do it. The thing that's missing in all these discussions, I believe, is that to really engage the public, what you have to do is you have to have issues that are important to them and present those issues to them and tell them, hey, we at neighborhood councils, we might be advisory, but we have positions that are able to get out to the people that we elect. So what you need to do is you have an opportunity right now, for example, that there's a Senate bill out right now where I think that almost everybody who owns a single family home or lives in one would want to have some type of a say about this, and they probably would if they knew that they have the possibility of having a 5 or 6 story building built next door to where they live. And if you were to go ahead and you were to take issues like this that are important to people and advertise those issues and say, neighborhood councils deal with these issues, this is a way to get to your representative like that, you would wind up being overwhelmed by the number of people that want to get involved in these neighborhood councils, not just a handful of people here and there like that. But I think that's the only possible way that you have. And if you have certain issues in a particular area or zone that are important to those people, you can advertise those. But it has to be an advertised issue-based campaign if you ever want to get people to know even what's going on. So that's my opinion for what it's worth. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Ken. Tony?
I couldn't agree more with Ken's comments, but let me defend our great general manager, Chang, because we have this battle where the city attorney doesn't want neighborhood councils to consider anything other than city issues, which of course means anything health related because the county does health, or anything that relates to local zoning code, like the state Senate Bill 79 to put apartment buildings right next to your single family home. And so she's going to be in political pressure if she builds a list like that. That's why we have the Valley Alliance. We try and put those on, bring those issues here. But we have to figure a way around this, but let's not force Dunn into it because they're in a hard place. I did, Sophia, a little bit of hair went up on the back of my neck when you said, we're going to go to Dunn and see if they can't do anything about these complicated bylaws. And first of all, thank you, because yes, it's a real problem. So we should always have our ears open for that. But those people who say, why don't we just standardize neighborhood council bylaws? A certain Valley councilwoman is famous for this, so that there's more inclusive is kind of a problem when you do things locally. I want to make 2 comments on bylaws. First of all, I think it's unacceptable to the Department of Neighborhood Empowerment to have bylaws only be able to be modified 1 year yes, 1 year no. That's basically what you do by so-called freezing the bylaws to accommodate the city clerk. I believe bylaws changes should be frozen during the city clerk period, but the bylaws themselves should be able to be changed for anything that does not affect the ballot voting model. For example, if you want to add or subtract committees, you want to add an equity officer, you want to do all kinds of other things within the neighborhood council bylaws. Change your rules for removing people from vacant seats. None of these things affect the ballot voting model, so we should be able to change them during the election period. And two things that relate to this and relate to electionability. When we put these together like 20 years ago, everybody was interested in neighborhood councils, and they were particularly wanted to even be more local. So people created local geographic seats. But then they said, well, of course, only people in that geographic area, think of it as a precinct, should be able to vote for those seats. So we have lots of things, and all honor to Roy and his Encino, but he's got a lot of separate geographic seats, and he's got a lot of alternates, but each one of them is only for one of those small geographic seats. So they rarely have a chance to participate in the board. The alternates probably don't all come. I succeeded in getting floating alternates in a deal with a former city attorney, deputy city attorney, and it works like a charm. We do have geographic seats in Panorama City, but it's a nomination district, not an election district. It's to keep the geographic representation spread across 5 different areas. And I suggest that with at-large voting, considering our low turnouts, might actually be very helpful. You can keep the nominations for the seats local, but every seat appears on the whole ballot so that you have fewer districts being elected with 4 votes to 3. The second change is that the floating alternates. This is such in an era of quorum inability. It gives you extra chances to make your quorum. We have 21 seats. So, and it's awfully hard to keep on getting 11 people, believe it or not, but I've got 5 extra chances to meet the quorum. And number 2, when you have elections, you can have everyone win elections. In other words, the top 5 vote getters in the election who do not get their seat will be alternates 1 through 5 ranked by their votes. That is actually not determined, although we had originally thought the clerk would do it. They have decided never to include our alternates in their reporting results. So in fact, adding alternates shouldn't affect the ballot voting model because they're ignoring the fact that these floating alternates exist. So therefore, we should be able to add them even during the election season. So I'm just throwing those 2 ideas out there, at-large voting versus by-district voting, and having floating alternates, which are kosher, but almost nobody uses it. I think that Woodland Hills has gone to floating alternates. Congratulations. But I think it's a wonderful secret. I'm throwing those 2 out, and this is going to take cooperation between Dunn and the clerk. I just want to put the idea out there. Thanks.
Thank you, Tony. Mike?
Hi, everybody. It's really good to see so many of my fellow colleagues and elected officials. I have long been an advocate of continuity among city clerk, Dunn, city funding. Sometimes it can be very frustrating, as you all know, and we definitely need greater continuity. We have lost a lot of good members to the NC system because of that frustration. And I also got to get something off my chest that is really bothering me, in that I received a couple of phone calls from stakeholders about a month and a half ago that told me that they were concerned about the eligibility of one of our newest candidate members. And I decided that I would call the city clerk's office to find out what their eligibility was. And I found out that it was through their work. And I didn't think too much of it, but I did relay a message as to what the details were. And then the people got back to me. And as I hear it in so many words, the city clerk was contacted again. And we were told that since the elections were already certified, it just didn't really matter anymore. Well, I think it does, personally. moving fast forward on July 3rd, this particular candidate who had just gotten sworn in was actually questioned by some of the stakeholders. I didn't say a word at the meeting. Some of the stakeholders, 3 different stakeholders at the meeting with regards to their eligibility. And it got to the point where the NEA also had to ask certain questions from this person. And the person admitted at that point that their business was a nonprofit and that indeed the address that was given to the city clerk was P.O. Box for the United States Post Office within the area. Now, I've been in this system for 12 years, 7 years as vice president, 4 years as president. I've never heard anything like this. After the whole thing got tabled, and we have to come back and resolve this later. Now, it was also be noted that right after the meeting, within an hour and a half, that person went back online and changed his address just to cover up, obviously. But then I have received some information as of today that under the 2025 City Clerk Neighborhood Council document guide, a person who owns or works within the NC must provide documentation demonstrating that their place of documentation provided by the candidate established and additional information. And our policy with regards to the seat, we all are members at large, and the ability of the candidate to use a P.O. box of the document. And the rule applies to renters, homeowners, and community interest stakeholders across the board, and therefore they're eligible. Now, and you have to excuse me, I just had glaucoma surgery, so it's a little bit hard for me to read what's on my other screen. What I'm concerned that this is something that would affect all 99 neighborhood councils, in that if we go by, well, you can use zip codes and P.O. boxes, you could actually have stakeholdership anywhere in the state. And this is not what we signed up for. It's very clear from the beginning that when you sign that paper under penalty of perjury, that is your physical address within that boundary. And you sign it, as I said, under perjury, and that's that. According to our Granada Hills bylaws, which states that all members at large, basically, even whether you live there or you move, you forfeit the ability to be on that board if you're not within, if you don't work, own property, or no longer have any kind of community stakeholdership or organization ties. I'm bewildered because I just find this whole thing incredulous. It just doesn't seem right to me. Anyway, I thought I'd bring this to your attention and let you all know. Thank you.
Just to speak on that briefly, I don't want to get into necessarily details, but I do want to specify that the situation is when we talk about work, that's when work is a little bit more broad. And so I just want to state we can talk about specific details. That's a specific case. I don't want to get into details, but I just want to state that working in the neighborhood council is providing services in the area. So.
But what about the post office box? Would that be considered
that's valid? That policy for the documentation guidelines has not changed since 2008. So that only applies, the inability to use a P.O. box only applies to homeowners, to renters, and I think those are the only two, right, Mike?
And,
But-
and community interest, because
there's a lot, because there was a big backlash before that regarding businesses who have PO boxes and not an actual mail, like an established mailing address. So that actually has not changed for 17, 18 years.
But in this particular case, it gave its primary and principal address as the post office. And
Right.
that they're saying that's their physical address,
That's
which is
their mailing
completely
address. But
untrue.
again, we could take this offline. We did send out communication related to that so that we could talk about that separately.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. Heath and then Burton.
Ken, all right, hopefully I'm unmuted,
Yes.
but I'm getting some echo, so this may be difficult because I'm on two devices and I don't know which one my AirPods are connected to. First of all, good evening, Michael, Mary Lou, and Sophia. Michael, I feel like we became best friends over the last 2 months. I had to contact you over so many issues. And I want to say that you were always professional and helpful. I didn't necessarily agree with the answers you provided at the time you provided them, but your supplemental answers justified things. And this had to do with a candidate that we had who ran for a CBO seat in an area that the organization has defined parameters of what it takes to be a member of that organization. And this candidate did not meet those qualifications that were published by the organization. And the organization itself, instead of providing the letter saying this person is a member and we recognize them, expressly disavowed any relationship with this person and did not want this person in any way associated with the organization. And we'll get into some other details maybe later. Hopefully, you'll have a special workshop to go and sit down with us to deal with the bylaw problems and the CBO seats and things, because it's just too much. We'll be here to midnight if I got into the details of what happened in Woodland Hills. But what I want to do touch on quickly are some of the points that were mentioned earlier. The library boxes were the best kept secret. I didn't know about it until the final weekend because the published election handbook and all the outreach that you guys did to the neighborhood council and the community saying this was an election that would be strictly vote by mail. And you had the flow chart of the documents going back and forth, and it always ended in putting your documentation into the postage paid envelope and returning it to the clerk. And then all of a sudden we found out this secret of the libraries was available. And I personally mailed my 2 family ballots in there, and there were 2 others, so 4 from Woodland Hills, and I just had to test the system. And, talking to the librarians, they said, oh, yes, we have something in the corner. We know nothing about it. It was just, like I say, the best kept secret. We've got to work on the bylaws problem for sure. But the other problem, which was touched on earlier, seniors cannot get to, and some college educated people that are young couldn't get through establishing an Angelino account. And so that's a non-starter. And then in our case, because Woodland Hills, as Tony mentions, has all these different zones and areas and so forth, we had people that qualified to vote in multiple areas that our election was holding elections in. And the form that you provided for people to register was one size fits all. And it didn't address any of our specifics. So people didn't qualify, couldn't put down on the form all the areas they qualified in. And that was very frustrating. So thanks to August, my 22-year veteran with me on the Woodland Hills board, we created our own form that expressly provided each of the areas. And I think that probably cut down on the workload of your staff that had to deal with all these supplemental filings and extra documents and so forth. And what we did is we even put the most popular CBOs on each area, which was the area, the easiest way for people to qualify that didn't otherwise live in the area. We put them as a checkbox on the form and provided their addresses. So the voter applicant just had to check the box. And Michael, your staff had it all there and could just copy and paste. But we have to improve the registration and documentation process in the future. And I wholeheartedly look forward to in-person voting. But as you say, with the city's financial crisis, who knows what's going to happen? And what was just mentioned about someone who registered with a PO box, I discovered that of one of our newly elected board members because I wanted to reach out to him in advance of our meeting last night where we elected a new president, vice president, and officers and so forth. And they're still stuck with me and August because we were reelected as officers again. So have pity on the Woodland Hills board and community for having to deal with us a while longer. But in any case, when I went to reach out to this person because of the prohibition of using the registration data for any personal purpose, I went and Googled the person to find him, even though I had the spreadsheet of candidates that Michael forwarded, so we could send them their training things ahead of time. But I put a blinder on and Googled the guy, and it turns out the address he used I recognized immediately because it was the UPS store where we used to have our private mailbox. And it turns out the UPS store lost their lease. So we haven't had the box. UPS hasn't existed there in 9 months, yet you certified him probably as a candidate with the PO box address. And that's why I would like to see in the future that the neighborhood councils set up a panel of election administrators to work with you and look at the candidate credentials and point out the weaknesses that only can come when you live and work and play in the neighborhood. You down at Piper Tech wouldn't know about that address. Or even if you saw, oh, it's a UPS store, you wouldn't know that they lost their lease and haven't been there for 9 months. So we have to have more collaboration in the future. And with that, I'll end it, but say thanks for all the hard work for everybody that they did.
Thank you, Heath. Burton and then Ginny.
Hi, Burton Hunter with our Lita Neighborhood Council. We didn't have a huge turnout of ballots that ended up back to be counted back to the city clerk, but for a board seat, but I do want to trying to get people to apply for a vote by mail ballot. That process turned out to be a bit difficult in our area. Some of the candidates that we had from our board went door to door, to ask people to apply for a ballot. And they found that very difficult because people were really skeptical of somebody coming to their door and asking them to, you know, provide this information, your name, your birth date, your driver's license, all of that. And that doesn't have anything to do with the current, you know, stuff going on around us. But they had a lot of trouble with that. They couldn't help them fill it out because they couldn't get the, you know, the copy of their driver's license and or identification and stuff. So they found a lot of their efforts going door to door they just kind of walked away after a couple of weekends of trying that, just going, this doesn't seem to be going anywhere. The majority of the votes, applications, I mean, seem to be from, like, for myself, where I work and where I and the place where I attend church and stuff. I was able to go around to individuals and ask them to apply for a ballot because I was running, you know. That was the only reason they agreed to do that. But I had to walk them through the process and then email in the application and all their accompanying identification and stuff like that. So and they only did that because they trusted me personally to discreetly handle that information, and once the election was over, to do away with it. And I think that may have accounted for the votes that we got in our neighborhood council election, save for a few others that came that did the same thing for people that they contacted. Trying to get people to apply for a vote by mail ballot was not an easy process. And even those that, once they got their ballot, they had to come back to me and go, okay, I know to vote for you. Who else do I vote for? You know, it was just kind of dependent on that, just on that personal touch. And it was limited to the number of people that I could personally touch, and a few of the other people at our board could touch. That's why our numbers were so very low for this type of a voting format. Most of the people I've talked to from our neighborhood council and other ones would like to go back to an in-person one, but recognize that wasn't possible this round. But looking towards that, maybe that would help increase the numbers. Anyway, that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Burton. Ginny and then Glenn.
Yeah, you know, the real disconnect with the voter turnout is the lack of the in-person voting. I think we've all mentioned that tonight. We all kind of agree. I know the clerk's office does. I know Dunn probably does. The budget wasn't there to do it. But, you know, it really handicaps the neighborhood councils because we have two barriers that we're facing. Number one, what we talked about, a lot of people still don't know what the neighborhood councils are all about. And we're into 20 some odd years here now. We do our best. We have core people, you know, like in Valley Village that I represent, you know, who are in and do know. The other thing is that they really are confused about why they have to apply to get an application to get a ballot, when that is counterproductive to everything elections they voted to in the past. I mean, the clerk's office does a good job. The state does a wonderful job when you vote now. I mean, you get an email for every single thing that you do. So people want to know, why do I have to do this? You know, it's an extra added step. Getting the Angelino account, I had problems with that. That was my own fault. But, you know, and then registering. We're disenfranchising off the bat a certain percentage of people in our communities because they don't use internet that much. They're not comfortable with the online voting. So, you know, we wonder why, you know, we get the results we do. I mean, in our particular election this year, we had, what was it, 297 applications for a ballot. Only 104 of the stakeholders actually turned in a ballot. So I'm kind of curious. I know, Michael, you mentioned some of the reasons. If we ask you, can you tell us the difference, the almost 200 people who never followed through to get a ballot? Or were there actually some people you sent a ballot to and they didn't even vote? I mean, I don't know. Maybe that's a possibility. So, I mean, that's something I'd be interested in. I appreciate what you guys did. We had two major events during the whole voting process. We had our Earth Day event the end of April. And basically, that's always well attended because we shred stuff for free for everybody who wants to come. And we had someone from your office. We had our liaison from the clerk's office who was out there registering people, okay? And the second event was our Coffee with a Cop, which we had on June 7th, which was right before the close. And, you know, that was well attended. So we got, you know, maybe 60 or so applications as a result of those two events. That was great. The thing is, you know, if neighborhood councils want to get on people's radar, we've got to be out there, okay? So any attempt we have to make ourselves known, and especially with elections that are important, and getting candidates. Candidates aren't as hard to get because basically we kind of know the people who come to our meeting. We know the ones maybe who serve on our committees. We're out and about in the communities and we can tap these people and go to them and say, hey, look, you know, I know you're interested, you do this and that. And we've been pretty successful in getting our candidates. The voting, when we had in-person voting, I mean, I remember one year, and of course, issues tend to bring out people too. We had over 1,000 people. It was our best election ever. You know, so the more visible you make the voting process, the better it's going to turn out. I have a question. If, you know, you have data on who votes in each neighborhood council. Do you retain that data over the years? Do you keep these lists? Can you keep them?
So as of right now, we keep the contact information. We don't keep any specific information. But we do try to retain that their emails so that we could send out an email blast. So hopefully say, you know, NC elections are coming, things like that.
I mean, if you did that and had kept a list like a voter registration list for each NC, you could send out the application to submit a ballot to those people. If they, you know, they send it back, they don't qualify, they don't qualify. But if they do, they're automatically on. I mean, that's something that they're used to, at least.
We've gotten that feedback and we are looking into having some sort of voter registration
yeah, okay.
model, but it is very complicated because we don't have the capacity currently to establish voter rolls essentially for each neighborhood council, but we are definitely looking into that.
Yeah. Well, if the city council is really, you know, upset because our turnout or we ever get, when they do that, just tell them we need the money to have the in-person. That's what we need. Then you'll get a turnout. Okay.
Yeah.
So I appreciate what you're doing. On Dunn's part, I thought the Canva and all their outreach was much, much better. You know, that just hit me right off the bat. So congrats to you. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, Glenn, and then Lydia.
Thanks for being here. So first of all, the dollars, I hope your report will include what it costs to do the vote by mail, because some of us are wondering, given the number of vote, I mean, obviously there's more postage involved than the in-person voting, but there needs to be an analysis of how much was spent, number one, doing, and for what we got in terms of the numbers of applications submitted and ballots mailed back, and et cetera. That's not on you, but about the ballots being mailed back. Anyway, and then maybe the most recent in-person vote by mail polling place. What does it cost to operate that polling
I
place?
saw it because they were like, we were working on the fridge, the answer attacking.
We're going to mute Kevin. So that's number one. So give us informed information on the dollars, because some of us are wondering, how much did the city save by doing all vote by mail? Maybe we saved money. I don't know, because I'm looking at how much it costs for postage prepaid envelopes and ballots going out and ballots going back, et cetera. All right, number two, I noticed in some of the neighbor councils, and Michael, you've heard this before from me, some of the neighbor councils on the tally for a particular seat, it indicated the number of ballots that were not marked for that particular seat. So if it was only vote for one, if you add up the number of votes for the two different candidates, or three, if you add up the votes for the candidates plus the number that was in the election results that said the number of unvoted ballots for that seat, you could figure out how many total ballots there were. But in some of the results for some of the neighbor councils, and I haven't looked at all of them, that's not included. Some it is, some it's not. I'm not sure why that is. Maybe you could comment on that. But the bottom line is, as we see these results, it would be nice, helpful to have that tally number to know how many ballots were included at that particular time, even for the preliminary results and certainly for the final, because I don't know how long it's going to be before we get that. And frankly, yeah, maybe it does vary by seat, that there's more fall off or not. It'd be good to know that and be upfront on that. The remove, first of all, and thank you, Michael, for putting up with me in terms of getting the, I didn't bother you every day, but it seemed like it, as far as getting the details of, the ballots counted. I think people might be interested in knowing in detail, because I think I understand in terms of, starting to count the ballots the day after the Tuesday election date, but you don't release the results until the following week. But you do additional counts of things that have come in until then, and then the final is anything beyond that. But it also included some that you may have had because you were still verifying signatures or whatever, and that wasn't really clear to, just as far as the process, that it would have such an impact for some neighbor councils. And maybe I'm more sensitive to it because it sounds like from your numbers that Encino represented about a third of the requested ballots, about a third of the total number of ballots returned for the Valley, and maybe just the numbers, the larger numbers accentuated that. But so maybe, okay, a couple other thoughts. I think that even if a election is not triggered because of things that have been described earlier in this meeting, I think that the candidate statements and the description of the documentation that they provided should be retained on your website. It appears to have been disappeared if there was an election. I don't see what it would hurt to include those neighborhood councils in the drop down so that folks can see, okay, in this case, an issue came up. What was the documentation that the person put forward, even though it wasn't no election was held for that seat or for that particular neighborhood councils. The alternates. So Tony, just so you know, Encino went through a board restructuring, and take a look at the bylaws, because we have adopted for our, not for the area seats, there's a 1-for-1 for the 7 areas, but for the others, we have a ranked alternate 1, 2, and 3 for that pool of folks, for the other more than half of the board. So just know that you can't pick on Encino anymore in that regard. I mean, you can for the others. So, and it does work, because I'm aware of another neighborhood council that has been able to achieve quorum because of the alternates, being there. And yes, they are temporarily made the seats temporarily at large. I definitely recommend, whether it's the voter run up, the voter number of votes, or even if you fill it as an appointment, it's also a training ground for people who can test out the system. It can be people who maybe been on the board and they don't want the full commitment, but it can also be a way of saying, let me start this out, let me do the trainings, and if it works out, then I can be appointed to a full board seat. My last comment has to do with the issue of candidate verification. So there's at least two of us on this call, Tony and I, who were independent election administrators in 2012 and 2014 when the Department of Neighborhood Empowerment handled the verification of the candidates. And I can assure you that we did our level best, regardless of the seat, that you had to have a physical street address. You could have a PO box for mailing purposes, but you had to qualify being a physical street address. And I put into chat an excerpt from your documentation guide that says, for work, it says all documentation provided must, to a reasonable extent, show the stakeholder's name, the address of the stakeholder's place of work, and a visible date. Well, our argument has always been, you can't live in a PO box, you can't set up your office in a PO box, and so I think you need to change this documentation procedures so it's always regardless of stakeholder type. I mean, even our community interests on your own candidate filing form for community interests, which is probably the least connected folks typically for a neighborhood council. It's a person who's continuously maintained a physical street address within the boundaries of the neighborhood council for not less than 1 year, and that performs ongoing and verifiable activities, blah, blah, blah. Community interest, a physical street address maintains. That doesn't allow for a post office box. And it's very clear that in this particular instance, and I'm aware of some other instances in prior years, that when a person on their website for their business lists their address as a post office box, but on the form that they filled out for city clerk, they hid the fact it was a PO box and put the street address. And then when it came up at the neighborhood council, they removed it from their website, that it was just the PO box. Now, I acknowledge that people, like in real estate, can have a certain geographical area that they mine that they do listings for and that they can qualify. There's definitely a way that people, and the PO box is acceptable for mailing purposes. So you can do work in an area because you're, you could even be like have a landscaping business, a pool service, and your clients are within the neighborhood council, and you've got real estate list. You have all these things that can do that. But we can't verify that because it's no longer listed on your website. In general, if there was no election, the description of the documentation. And the worst part is that at the neighborhood council meeting that Mike described, this particular individual admitted that all he had was a post office box and that he had no other address or no other connection to that particular neighborhood council. He worked from home, which is in a different community. So, that I know that's beyond the city clerk, but it's now the Department of Neighborhood Empowerment is going to have to deal with a fact who's clearly ineligible to hold that seat. If they got through the city clerk because of a loophole, because you're interpreting these things to allow PO boxes, that loophole needs to be closed. But now it needs to be in the hands of Department of Neighborhood Empowerment, the neighborhood council, and possibly the city attorney. Thank you very much. And if you want to respond to a couple things I mentioned, I would appreciate it.
Sure. I will say we are going to work on getting that budget info so that we have that number. I do take note to including more information on the results, both the unofficial results and the official results, so that you can kind of get an idea of how many ballots we've actually processed. So I'll work with the systems team to see what's possible to add there, because we do get that question a lot and it can be very confusing. Encino, for example, someone might only they might only vote for maybe the area, but they don't vote for the other ones, and it can make trying to figure out how many ballots there are pretty confusing. I do understand I'll try to see what we can do to clarify the tally process to kind of make that explain that a little bit more so all NCs are on board. It does change kind of depending on the model. So with all vote by mail, we release the unofficial results 7 days after election day versus when we have at polls, we typically do it, I think it's 4 business days after, because the majority of votes are going to be actually at polls. So that's easier to do. So it kind of varies, but I do understand that it can be a little bit confusing. So I do want to clarify that. And we will also look into if we can keep the candidate list available for board affirmations so that if there are any questions, we can kind of, that can still be reviewed by the neighborhood councils.
Thank you. I'm going to jump in for a second. I think that the general manager, Gracie Liu, had us, the neighborhood councils, try to learn Nation Builder. And I think Nation Builder was a good program that is actually used by candidates for the city. I think that Dunn should probably get that back. We were supposed to pay for it ourselves, which was something that we didn't vote on. But the biggest problem, I think, with Nation Builder was we never really learned how to use it. I attended several sessions on how to use the product, and I was never successful. But I do think that Dunn should, at least a year before, use Nation Builder and notify everyone that there is a neighborhood council in their vicinity, and this is where you look for it and find it, and maybe send out a couple times, because that is voter registration. I also think that because neighborhood councils are allowing people that work in the community to vote, that we need to contact Valley Economics Alliance, as well as VICA, Valley Industry and Commerce Association, and ask them for participation and notify that we could get more people to join us in our community events. That's all I have to say about that. Lydia, and then Brian.
Yes. So I don't know if you could see it on the screen, but what I have up is the election handbook from the city clerk's office. I'm going to take it off because I just want to basically say, when it comes to PRA requests, it specifically states here of what is subject to disclosure and what is not. And it says, in order to protect a candidate's right to privacy, the following information will be redacted and is not subject to disclosure unless legally required. Date of birth, telephone number, mailing address, qualifying address. They have it listed separately. Photo identification for any documentation necessary to establish board seat eligibility. Well, the problem is these are the items that the candidate has to submit to qualify to run for the seat. And the city clerk's process is you can go ahead and file a challenge if you'd like, but they don't give you the information nor show you the documentation of what that person has submitted to qualify. And then they say, well, you missed the challenge deadline. Of course you did, because nobody let you have access to the information for you to look at. So there needs to be a better list as far as like what you can eliminate somebody for. And the fact is, I am a former bank commissioner, and it has always been that you can't use a PO box, regardless if it was for work or if it was for somebody who lives in the community or owns or rents. The way it's always been done is that if you were somebody like, quote, a real estate agent who did sales in that community, even though your office may be in Encino, then as part of your paperwork, you could show that you had houses that closed in that area. But you aren't, the city clerk's office is not providing the documents so you can see what is being claimed as far as their stakeholder status. And it can't be both ways. It has to be fair. And I also read through the entire election booklet. I read it earlier today and I read it again this afternoon or evening. And it basically says it refers to the P.O. box, no using the P.O. box for renters, blah, blah, blah. But it does not say anything about this does not apply to somebody who's applying as a business owner or worker in the community. It does not say it. It does not say it does not include. So I wanted to bring that up.
Thank
And
you.
also on the state website where they have to apply for the organization, it says under penalty of perjury that they cannot use a P.O. box. So the organization that is listed on the state website is using the same P.O. box that is not allowed by the state under penalty of perjury and is now being used to claim a seat on a neighborhood council. I know the person. I happen to be at the meeting. I have no issues with this person whatsoever, but we need to make the rules and follow them. And those are the way, as far as I'm concerned. I've been doing this for 20 years. It's always been that way. Thank you.
Thanks, Lydia. Brian, and then Judith.
Okay, I'll make this as short as I can. It should be really short. Two comments. Number one, everybody I think knows the phrase, too much of a good thing is not a good thing. And we have 99 NCs, way too many. We need to cut it back. But the big issue here that I'm hearing addressed is the P.O. box. And all I'm going to say is there is no reason whatsoever why a P.O. box should ever be a qualifying address under any circumstances, because you cannot even get a P.O. box without giving them your address. So, and you cannot run a business out of a U.S. postage box. So it is absolutely absurd that we allow such a situation to go on. We manipulate things so much in this country that it's impossible to exist. We are all attacked every day by fraud calls and fraud situations. And now you allow for a fraudulent issue of a P.O. box because the only reason to use a P.O. box is to skate around some issue that you don't want to be known for. So if there's anything that we get out of this, it is eliminate P.O. boxes as addresses. There is no valid reason to have them. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Brian. Judith, and then Jennifer. Judith, you need to unmute. I guess you're having trouble, Judith, unmuting. Okay, we'll go on to Jennifer and then Kevin.
Hi, I just wanted
Hi,
to,
Jennifer.
how you doing? It's so nice to be able to be here with you guys tonight. So the conversation about elections, I just wanted to ditto everybody else that has lifted up Michael. Fantastic representation, interaction. Appreciate you so much. We are one of the NCs that did not trigger an election. So we were second cycle through board affirmation. So I don't have as much to speak on the election part of it and the ballot part of it. But I can speak at least on the initial part of it. I just want to ditto what Glenn said about actually getting a price comparison, that cost comparison, because that's going to be the biggest tool we're going to be able to have to fight for us to be able to have the in-person representation for the next election cycles. And we can't wait 2 years. We need that information probably within the next 6 months so that we can start fighting for that before the next July, well, even before that, right, budget, so that we can make sure we have that money set aside to be able to move forward with that. And that's all I wanted to talk about. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Jennifer. Kevin?
I would actually, for the next election, I'd advocate moving in a different direction than the ones largely proposed here. I'd actually encourage an electronic component with an in-person component. So for those who are comfortable with computers, they can do their voting electronically, but then you coordinate with a local library or local rec center so that they can come in, and if anybody is uncomfortable with the process, that they would be able to come in and meet with somebody and have them guide them through the process. But if you would go that way, I would not test it on the fly. I wouldn't build the plane going down the runway. I would start about 6 months earlier and come up with something and do a beta test to make sure it works or not. So that's the way I would see it. I think it's more environmentally friendly. It's easier for those people who do have some tech savvy, but allow an in-person component, so those people who want to meet with somebody and be guided through the process are able to do so. Thanks.
Good idea. Howard and then Gary.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, and to all my friends and colleagues here in the Valley. A practical question that I will direct to Michael, and that is, how will the city clerk settle an election tie when the candidate doesn't respond to requests to meet and draw lots to determine the winner?
So luckily, we have never handled that. We always are able to get a hold of the candidates. I know for your specific election, it's been a little bit challenging getting both of the candidates to agree on a date, but the drawing of lots will be taking place tomorrow. However, if there's any sort of reason, like let's say that a candidate doesn't show, we'll deal with that when it comes. But I have been in contact with both of the candidates, and so it is scheduled. And I'll let you know tomorrow the results.
Oh, that would be great. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Gary.
Thank you, Linda. Okay. The old timers will remember this. Remember the Starbucks receipt? You could vote in all councils, just bring in a receipt. You could run for councils, it seemed. I forget if that would work, but there was a lot of abuse for that, and they finally put an end to it. Therefore, compare this. Why would an air conditioning service repairman, a gardener, an appliance repairman, people who do service work, basically I'm headed toward real estate. Oh, well, I sell houses in that area. Is there does Dunn or city clerk make any effort whatsoever to verify or validate that? Again, all those groups of people can run in, all these neighborhood councils because, and it's unlimited. How is that any better over the Starbucks receipt? I really believe, and this may be offending some people, I'm sorry, but the physical place of employment is within a neighborhood council, and that should be the qualifying area. That's my opinion. Thank you.
So just to clarify a little bit, so when it comes to work, real estate agent is a perfect example. They might have a physical office that's outside of the boundaries, but they can provide documentation proving that they work within the boundaries. And that documentation would need to be provided. So,
Judith, are you able to unmute?
But again, I do want to say we hear your concerns. We will be working with you all. We do intend to make updates, getting everybody's feedback. We have no issue with that, but currently that's what our position is. And we're happy to meet with you all to entertain any type of changes to our processes to improve them.
Linda, Mike is waving his hand.
Yes, I know. We're going to have to move on, though. Mike had a chance to speak, and Joanne did a little earlier. Judith, I'm sorry, we can't get you unmuted, so we'll move on. I do want to thank Sophia and Michael and Mary Lou. Thank you so much for listening. Really appreciate your attendance this evening. And you've got some comments, and I do think that we need to start the process a year before, not just a couple days before, and get the word out. And actually, for Dunn, they need to be doing this all year long. It's sending out information to the public that there is a neighborhood council and that we are there dealing with land use issues or school issues or traffic issues or street signs or whatever. So we're there really to provide information to our elected officials. But anyway, thank you so much. I
Thank
appreciate
you.
you coming this evening.
Thank you very much,
Thank
everybody.
And you can leave at will. You don't have to stay to the bitter end.
Bye.
Bye. Okay, going on to number 4, we need to remember the purpose of our neighborhood councils, and we need to stress that to the new people on the boards. City services are things that we actually are trying to get back. A lot of our city services have been diluted in recent months. And community involvement, we really need to do a better job with getting our word out to our own stakeholders. Some of us don't, we had an excellent communications officer who's no longer on our board, so we're stumbling to get the word out for many things. So I think we probably need to get some assistance on that, and maybe Mary Lou can have a way or a list of things that we can do to start outreaching. On pages 4 and 5, there's a VANC welcome letter to new board members. We wanted to make sure that the Valley knows that we have VANC and that we meet, and please not to have meetings during the second Thursday of the month if you can avoid it, so that we can all get together and hear from each other. Number 6 is to find where and when city council committees meet. I think it's important for all the board members to know that. And so there is a link on the website, on the agenda, so you can find out when the council meets and what committees the council members are on, so you can direct your correspondence directly to them. Joanne, you have your hand raised. Did you have something else you wanted to say? Or not? Okay.
I don't want to create a non sequitur that was up from before, but in terms of letting new people know, we have had so many problems with insufficient information about what's needed to utilize our funds. We still haven't resolved our last expenditure, and I'm just not sure where this fits in, but there's a new city council passed a motion having to do with the minimum wage that has to be paid to people who do work under subcontract to the city. And so our long-serving landscaping company that takes care of our medians in our neighborhood is now going through hell trying to satisfy a city contract that they don't want to sign. And we as the neighborhood council had no idea. And even today I got an email from the city clerk saying, we're working on, we had a meeting, we'll let you know what happened. We're still dealing with trying to get your vendor to sign this contract. And the strange thing is that this contract, that this change happened July 1st, and we're arguing over a contract from before July 1st, and they won't pay the vendor, and the vendor doesn't want to sign the contract. And we on our Parks Committee have just been in the dark. And so I find it very frustrating. We know that if we let go of these medians, they won't be in any city contract for maintenance. So either we do it or no one will, and we'll have a mess and, you know, dead trees, et cetera, and trash dump, if we don't have this vendor. So I just think we need some training in what the city clerk and what the city laws are. And if we're that paralyzed, then what's the point for 25,000 a year? I mean, I'm sorry, I'm just venting, but I really feel that we don't know enough. Thank you.
Is there a council file?
It passed. There's a motion that passed. And so our president is actually works in Nazarian's office. So he actually knew that it changed on July 1st. It passed quite a while ago, but as of July 1st, all vendors have to be paying $26 an hour. They have to be giving a certain amount of vacation. They have to be giving a certain amount of rest time. And these workers come twice a month to take care of our medians. I mean, they're not, you know, full-time city workers. So I don't know how they're going to resolve this. And the city clerk's not engaging with us. They're not talking to the Parks Committee. They're not talking to my treasurer. They're not talking to, we had to reelect our treasurer who doesn't even want to be reelected because she's in the middle of this and we can't have somebody that isn't trained trying to figure out how to be treasurer. So we begged her to stay and not resign as treasurer till this mess gets resolved. And, you know, there've been 3, 4, 5 people in the city clerk's office involved with this. And, you know, there's something called attestation, which I never encountered before. I mean, we've been dealing with, you know, lots and lots of money to these vendors since 2019. And all of a sudden, this new thing came up. Plus, they're balking about the contract from last year, which was never signed because they sent it to an email address of a person that doesn't do that work at that company anymore. So it never got signed. So then we were at the end of the fiscal year with an unsigned contract. And now they're trying to use the terms of the next fiscal year's contract, so, you know, rules. And we don't even know if we can keep these people on. I've told them, I said, if you can't sign the contract, we're not going to be able to use you. And we don't even know who else we would use. So we're very confused. It's very frustrating. I'm chair of a commission. I shouldn't be doing this. And yet Labor Council is taking up a ridiculous amount of my time and I'm in the dark. I don't even know what's going on. So it's frustrating. And I just think for $25,000 and trying to keep a few medians not looking too bad, it's not worth it. You know, I'm starting to realize that if the city's going to look like Max Headroom, well, then so be it. The people that can live with a city like that will stay, and the ones that can't will move. I mean, this is you know, I have never been this frustrated, and I've been pretty frustrated in the past.
Yes, I understand. Leonard, you had your hand raised.
Well, it just corollary to this, that anybody who's here who's been using Apple One for their services, they ran in, I don't know what their reason was, but they are no longer contracted with the city. I don't know whether it was an argument over finances or what, but they're gone and a couple others are gone as of June 30th, and there was no notice to anyone with regards to that.
Well, we're up to bond commissioners. So do you want to continue?
Yeah, I don't know what there is with us. We don't get a lot of election feedback personally. I mean, when we have our people like Michael come to our meetings and comment, we get some public comment. But nobody seems to be griping at the commissioners with regards to elections that I recall. And not much else is going on. We're trying to get a few things done. Didn't make any notes, but we did have the the executive, whatever they call him, of the Charter Reform Commission come to our meeting and speak to us. We do have an ad hoc committee that we're going to be trying to meet with neighborhood council members via Zoom, I presume, for feedback with regards to the Reform Commission and suggestions they may have, so that we can help neighborhood councils get that information to the commission. You should be hearing more about that shortly. Not sure what else. There doesn't seem to be a whole lot. It's kind of quiet these last couple of months. Any questions from anybody, I'll be happy to answer them. But I can't think of anything startling that's going on, other than the fact that at our last commission meeting, we had 7 commissioners attend, which, as far as I'm concerned, was a momentous event. So, oh, the other thing is we will probably, and we voted on it, but I think we've really got to sit down and do a little bit more with regards to amending our procedures with regards to evening meetings. Our vote was that we would have 1 per quarter, and we've already had 1 for a quarter, so we're looking at the 3 quarters following. And it has to do with commissioners being able to make meetings other than in the evening and some daytime meetings. There are some of us who are able to arrange our schedules so that we can make the majority of the meetings. There are others that, because of work, cannot. So we're going to be working on that. So we will have fewer evening meetings. And the reason is that each evening meeting at the City Hall costs approximately $9,200 for security. And the City Council was good enough to grant Dunn a total of $4,000 for this year for meetings for the commission. We've already had 1 meeting that cost $920. So that's eaten up part of the $4,000. So we're looking to have perhaps 3 more meetings and stay within that $4,000. Previously, we did have more money for evening meetings. When we the problem is going to be if we have any meetings out in the community for a particular reason, which we would normally meet in the community itself. There's certain ones that we have to meet in the community after notice, such as decertifying, which I don't see, or removing board members, which I don't know if that'll ever happen again as it did in the past. And those cost us about $600 to have one of those meetings because of city personnel who are there setting up for sound and such. So it's really become an issue of money. So that's where we are. And I guess we have elections this month at the commission. As I recall, our procedures at the second meeting in July, we elect president and vice president. So we will be doing that, I assume, at our next meeting. That's about all I can think of.
Great. Thanks, Lynn. Heath, you have your hand raised?
Yes, ma'am. Glenn, do you have an update for us on the censure policy that was supposed to be coming out?
Do I? Well, I can say that one portion of it has been viewed by the city attorney's office, and they've made some suggestions. But what we've really got to be doing, we've got a basic reform. And it is no longer 2 different subjects, one of censure, one of removal. It is a combined censure and removal. So a neighborhood council would have the ability to agendize an issue and they could specify if they wish to, or they could go forward with either censure or removal based upon board votes at that time. It would have to do with notice and such as that. And we've have some different rules for conduct that is at a board meeting as to how much time would have to elapse between a notice and the actual meeting, and conduct which would occur outside a board meeting, where essentially the witnesses were not all the board members who had watched whatever happened at the board meeting. And that would be a longer period of time for someone to gather their resources if they wish to defend against it. But really what's left is the process of getting it started. How many board members does it take to get it started? I know what we're thinking is it takes 2 board members to put forward a motion. One making it, the other to seconding it. So that makes good sense. The question is how they should move it forward. And I don't know if we're going to get into this or if we should get into it, but it appears that when we make a policy like this, the department and the city attorney's office come in and add to the process, such as the department gets to review the motion beforehand. And I can tell you that that has to do with liability. But I don't know what we're going to look at with regards to that. We're going to have some consultation with the city attorney's office. So that's about where we are. I hope that, well, it looks like, I guess the end of July, the chair, Commissioner Waters, is looking at having a Zoom meeting with neighborhood councils to give them what is presently there. I hope maybe we can get everything else done before that, and have neighborhood council members comment on what's really the important part, which is what it could be for, censure and or removal, and how it would work within the board meeting and voting and such as that. So as I say, now it's just part of the process, and how does it get started and such.
Great, thank you. If I could just make a follow-on comment a little bit on what I'd like to make sure the commission addresses is when a board has a censure motion and then you send the copy to Dunn, as we're quote advised to do, and then you hear back from the city attorney that they're conducting an investigation, and then and you have to hold off until they complete their investigation. How many weeks, months, or years is the city attorney allowed to be conducting this investigation without conduct any outreach to the witnesses, or finally releasing the conclusion of this illusionary investigation?
Well, it may not be the city attorney that's conducting the investigation. It may be a city department, and that's a very good point. Perhaps there should be some notice, because in certain instances, based upon the allegations with regards to what brought about the motion for censure or for removal, there may be a component with regards to, say, a protected class. And if there's a component of that, then it may be that personnel, even though we're not employees, personnel might get involved because they would have certain obligations and certain actions that could be taken, say, against a board member because there was a protected class involved. But perhaps we should talk about that with the city attorney and with the department a little bit more while we're doing this, because within our our code of conduct, it specifically says that for certain conduct, which is actual violence, threats of violence, et cetera, right along that there can be a suspension of the board member and a referral to the appropriate city department. So they may be looking at that same thing without saying it. So we'll have to inquire of that. I'm gonna make a note of that.
Thank you.
Okay, Tony, and then Lydia, and I'm gonna be leaving for just a second to get my little chihuahua from outside. She wants to come in.
Hang on just a second.
Okay.
I'm making a note.
And maybe Glenn, you could reach out to me offline and I could give you the details of a case that involves this situation.
Okay, so is Tony next?
Okay, there
Yes,
we
but
go.
Len
Okay.
was making his note, so.
I've got a note. I've got a note.
But I'm not sure if there's an answer, Lynn, but one of my real concerns is that, first of all, Robert's rules lets us censure people on our boards, even if the bylaws don't. And I realize the diligence with which you and your colleagues have put this together and the city attorneys advised on it. But frankly, putting this almost 1 page worth of single-spaced censure and removal process into the bylaws, when you could always censure somebody before until you decided to make it, a procedure, basically is board destructive. The whole process, which takes forever, divides boards and doesn't fix a problem that often needs to be immediately addressed. So back to Heath's problem about what happens when they're so-called doing an investigation. And frankly, Lynn, to your honest comment to us a few minutes ago about, well, I don't see where we'll have to meet for a board removal anytime soon. Acknowledge that it's almost impossible to get it done through this. And I think that what the so-called solution applied to neighborhood councils is more destructive than finding some way to immediately address something that's a true needs to be handled immediately problem. So as long as we're meeting online, I hope everyone is recording the meetings. First of all, nothing is more effective in preventing misbehavior than being on camera, personal opinion. And number two, in documenting those problems if you've got it on film. This leaves the problem of off board. Did they make a mean tweet? Yes, that's complicated. But I think that the problem of recording the meetings, if it delivers something that's just completely outrageous, should be able to be used with city attorney's approval as a method to act quickly without all the falderall. I'm just throwing that out there because I know why you put it together. It's just I don't think that the solution is a real solution to the real problems that we face. Thank you.
That Tony, is why we're trying to trim the process and get it down to a much shorter time, and with these comments, I'll take it to the CA and to the department and say, okay, here's a major complaint. Why is this within this? Why don't we have time limits and things of that nature, and et cetera? Because I agree with you. If you have conduct, now of course, those of us who have meetings in person, there's no film, but like Tarzana, it's always recorded. It's right there. And because of our recordings, we saved the job for our SLO, who somebody filed a complaint against. And once they got the recordings of what actually went on, it made a big difference in a Board of Rights hearing, a huge difference. So you're right, it's out there and it's for everybody to look at. So I will talk with them and say, why is it, we don't include this in the process? You have injected yourself into the process. We need to have some way to know what's going on or some way to regulate this, and such as that. We may not get any help with it, but then again, maybe we will. So I've made some notes from you also.
Thank you. Lydia?
Yes, Lenny, you know, we had big problems with our censure issue. And I just want to bring up everybody I've ever heard that filed a censure, the department has gone to them and said, you should cancel it, you shouldn't do it. They keep saying that it's our option to do it, but then when you actually file it, they want to take it away from you. And in my case, the department used it against me. And I have the documentation to prove it, that the allegations that were made against me were untrue. And they literally held on to the censure and removal of one of our board members until 6 months later, the same week they sent out our ballots. And the censure was somebody accusing me of something, and she ran against me for president. So that was a manipulation on part of the department. They were hoping that I would lose. I didn't. And when we went through the process, they found that I was the one who was in the right. But there has to be a way that board members can report back to the commission if these censures are being manipulated by the department. That's all I had to say. Thank you.
We always have public meeting at public comment at our meetings. And I think we may be the only commission that still does Zoom for participants. As long as we've got a place where we've got the bandwidth. In downtown, we always have the bandwidth. So, and if you ever see me during comments on Zoom to be looking at something, it's probably because I have the Zoom session up on my iPad so I can have a better look at whoever it is or the name of the person who's making the comments. So that's why you might see me looking at something other than the big screen where I got to crane my neck to see it up on the wall. So,
thank you.
Thank you. Glenn?
Yeah, for what it's worth, I mean, there's some neighborhood councils who just felt this censure was a disruptive process and did not include it in their bylaws back in the day before it was required. So it's unfortunate that option was taken away from them. So I don't know if that's being considered that a neighborhood council could even opt out for it. Because invariably when it happened, like what Lydia described, it was abused. I've seen other ones where it was abused from different neighborhood council. And also it, you know, the commission in its infinite wisdom, you know, made the threshold so low of only 3 people. So you got a board of 21 people. It's not that difficult to get 3 people who are, you know, say, hey, let's cause some trouble, or we don't like that person or whatever. And so, you know, our neighborhood council had a higher threshold. I think it was 5, so we didn't violate the quorum of quorum, but we put it at the highest possible number to make sure that it wasn't just, we're constantly not dealing with disruptive and non-productive type of activity. So to me, those things should be considered. Increasing the threshold for those that have a larger board, they can be more than 3 to initiate the proceedings and be able to opt out altogether. Thank you.
Well, you don't have to. Well, no, that's not true. One of the reasons that we did it was because of some things that had been going on, and we thought a uniform process would help. But and by the way, there is a statement in it that says if you misuse the process, that's one of the bases for censure or removal. So if you've got somebody that comes in and brings in a totally baseless allegation, just to get back at somebody. That is something that can be used to start a censure or removal process against those persons. That's specified. We removed some other things, some other language, which was used to fight against the process. So that will be gone now. And we'll let everybody look at it. Maybe there shouldn't be anything, but one of the biggest things, and I'll say it, most, or I think all neighborhood councils indicate that in one way or another, Robert's rules are their fallback with regards to how they conduct their meetings. And a strong chair has the ability to actually remove a board member after warnings. They can recess a meeting and ask them to leave if they're disruptive of the meetings. But that means the chair has to act and the board has to stand behind the chair. So that is something also to consider. And unfortunately, what we've seen on a number of neighborhood councils and ones I've seen personally, that doesn't happen. I'd like to see something like Robert's rules used if they wish to, but it's got to be done by somebody, who can actually move it forward. I think that sometimes Commissioner Atkinson's comments about leadership training for the executive committee members is really a good idea. I'm not sure who would do it, but I think that could be a very good idea so that they know precisely what procedures they can use to help bring order to a meeting. But in the meantime, maybe this is a solution.
Well, when a neighbor council goes back 8 years against somebody who's currently on the board, including 2 years when they weren't even on the board, pays neighbor council money to hire their minute taker to go and compile a dossier to create that case. To me, that's
we've solved that problem.
Okay. So I'm not disputing what happened in Palms where that incident of physical violence occurred. That certainly was appropriate for a censure. But when it's just a disagreement and you only need a majority of those voting to take action and vindictive action because somebody is unpopular, not in the majority. I mean, you can say in your rules that it's abuse, and the Department of Neighbor Empowerment said it was abuse, but the board moved ahead anyway and voted because they had the votes. So anyway, I just wish that there are definitely some negative consequences, and whatever protections that you think that might be there haven't, even its recent iteration didn't come into play.
Okay.
Thank you.
We'll look at it.
Thank you. Kathleen?
Thank you. I have to kind of piggyback on what Glenn was saying and the previous gentleman. If the a censor is brought by 3 individuals and with baseless and retaliatory accusations, really, what was always missing that I didn't like in the process before that was written up was that it should be clear that if these accusations are proven to be baseless, those individuals should be subject to the same process of censure and removal as the person they accuse. It's just unfair. It kind of stopped. It's very vague on what the punishment would be for these fake accusations. And I'm one of those people who's went through it. Now they dropped it, but meanwhile, those accusations and false claims are still out there. So I had that uphill climb. So I don't know what the answer is, but it has to be clear that if you just don't like a board member and you don't like the decisions they made, I think it either takes more than 3 people, which is a good idea. I'm going to suggest that we change that. Or it should be more emphasized more that if you make these kind of accusations that are retaliatory and baseless, really, that they will also be under the same scrutiny. Those individuals will be under the same scrutiny, and because they deserve to have that come down on them as well. I didn't have the opportunity to even speak to what was being said against me because that wasn't included. Unfortunately, they dropped out once they saw that there was no proof. That they were making accusations against me that were actually actions of a different person. But meanwhile, those lies were still out there, and my reputation was tarnished. I don't know how you're going to deal with this, but I hope it's a better process than what was going on before. Thank you.
Thank you, Kathleen. Jennifer?
Yeah, so I believe that that's been an ad hoc committee. Is that correct, Elaine? Discussion about censure and removal?
Yeah, they're ad hoc committees, yeah.
All right, so if you can just make sure that we afforded when, it'll probably be on the bonk meeting that there would be when the committee is going to discuss this some more. I just want to make sure that I'm at that meeting because I would like to bring up similar concerns to what I think it was just Kathleen that was talking. It's just such a, unless there are consequences, it is such a quick tool to use to bully an individual that's on the board so quickly. It's just, I know it's happened historically in my neighborhood council before I joined it, but I know about the issue. And I just want to make sure that I am there to hear about the changes and speak if they're not being addressed. Appreciate it.
That's what I say. One of the bases for having a motion to censure or a motion to remove is misuse of the process. So if there are false accusations that obviously are false, that's a misuse of the process. And so that subjects the persons who were misusing the process to the same action. In other words, they can now be subject of censure removal for their actions.
Which I can appreciate, but so oftentimes the individual that was accused or bullied initially, like they're so emotionally traumatized that they're not even going to go through that process or make those steps to do it because they just don't want to relive everything again. So where if the consequence was automatically built into the policy, that if there was no founding, like some sort of penalty, I'm not sure if they should be censured because they could have been in good intention. I'm not sure. It could not have been a bullying situation, but something where it's just like a talking to, a sitting down and going over the, like there has to be some sort of like action that they have to do with maybe with Dunn or an NEA to where they're educated further so they don't make the action again. But I hear what you're saying, that if it came down to that this was being used in thing, then that person that was accused. But I mean, the people that I talk to, they're like, I don't want to go through that whole process and relive everything again and make that the censuring against them. It just, it's a very gray area, in my opinion, on already situations where with a lot of people that have different opinions, and it can be very difficult for one person that might be representing a singular voice that's not the same as the rest of the board to feel supported to move forward with that. Hopefully I'm making myself clear.
No, you are.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Number 9 is budget advocates. Glenn, do you have any updates for us, or Brian?
Well, I thank everyone for attending Budget Day on the 21st of June, our annual event. Second largest citywide neighbor council event after the Congress of Neighborhoods. We had 261 registrations. Not everyone made it there, but appreciate the interest. Overall, it went well. There were a few bumps in the road. If you were there at the very beginning, you saw that the council president didn't show up and the mayor was there waiting. But anyway, we worked it out. And, so we do have a strict schedule. We were trying to follow it. And Uh, and then I've overall heard good feedback from the breakout sessions. There are some parts of this that were apparently recorded by Channel 35. And once we get those recordings, we'll post them on the website for those who missed it or those that want to see it again. We also have the PowerPoint that was presented by the city administrative officer, which was a great overview of the city's financial situation. It's kind of small print to see on the screen, so you'll want to take a look at that. So that'll be posted on our website. As far as the Valley, on our breakout sessions, we tried to fill vacancies in Region 3, which is Southwest Valley, and Region 4, which is Southeast Valley. We had some interest, but you do have to be a budget representative in order to be eligible to be nominated as a budget advocate. So be sure you do have 2 budget representatives. And if you're in those 2 regions, just know there is 1 vacancy for each region if someone wanted to not only be a budget rep, but possibly join the budget advocates. And do be sure to communicate with us. They serve at your pleasure. They can be a board member. They can be a former board member. They can be a committee member. They can be a stakeholder. Just anyone, who is interested in the city budget. And, if they have more time, they can take on more. And by the way, because we didn't fill it at budget day, the vacancies will hold special elections via email. So you'll get, the whole boards will get the email, but just know it's the nomination for budget reps. So again, make sure you've got 2 and let us know. And then the voting is the 2 budget reps. If they're not available, the treasurer is the first voter, and then the treasurer is first voter and president is second voter. Also, this being our largest event is also our most expensive by far, and appreciate the contributions of the neighborhood councils to Neighborhood Council Budget Day. We were able to work that out a couple years ago. We had an impasse, but it's now been worked out that neighborhood councils can contribute towards the work of the budget advocates, which is all year round. It's not just Budget Day. So it turns out that most of the neighborhood councils that contributed were from the Valley. We acknowledge them during the presentation, and we'll figure out some other ways to acknowledge the councils to this. So thank you very much. I think I'm allowed to give a shout out to North Hills West now. I wasn't allowed to do it at Budget Day, but I want to give a shout out to North Hills West for being our highest contributing neighborhood council in the city at $3,000. So thanks for your support. We won't bother you with the request for contributions for a while. So our next step is to organize our departmental teams. So there's 40 plus different city departments. We try to have a departmental team for each of them that's comprised of budget advocates, budget reps, and interested neighborhood council board members, stakeholders who are interested in the work of that particular department. So we will be starting to populate those first with budget advocates, then budget reps, and then open up to others during the next month or so. So if you have an interest in any of that, watch for that invitation, but it wouldn't hurt to just give us a heads up by email. Our website's on the agenda. Thanks for listening at budgetadvocates.org. Hopefully we'll get our departmental teams convened earlier this year, like right at the end of summer. And so that the reports about the reports with the various departments with the recommendations will happen earlier. So just a heads up for those that have participated in the past or have thought about it and maybe participate this year, that we're trying to get it an earlier time frame. Thank you. Oh, let's see. Yeah, we do have several budget advocates in attendance. Howard and Brian and Gary, and I think Moran and Lionel and Cindy. I say Howard. So anyway, if anyone else wants to chime in, feel free. I see some hands up too.
Yeah, we have a couple questions. Joanne and then Jennifer.
Yeah, I'm asking a question, not from me, but from one of our board members who went to Budget Day. And I have to confess, I've never gone, so just too much on my plate. But she wanted to know why she expected the budget to be described at the meeting. And she, I guess, had a different take on what the point of Budget Day is. So could you give me an answer that I can give to her? She's an attorney. She's quite smart, and she expected to have the budget parsed there, and it wasn't. So tell me why that doesn't happen and what the goal of Budget Day is.
Okay, so first of all, we don't have time to go through 2,000 pages of the budget books. So we give an overview. Sometimes we have a couple people giving an overview, such as the chair of the Budget and Finance Committee, who was there, and she's new, and she gave, I think, a good overview, but it was not, never really, even when Bob Bloomfield before him, Paul Kokorian, they would go over the broad brush of things. So we never go through 40 different departments and go that's what the budget books are for. I think the CAO did an excellent job of talking about the city's financial challenges, and that is, it's as it turns out for this budget day, and that's why I mentioned that PowerPoint being available, because that definitely went into the details of what the reasons for the city's financial challenges are in terms of revenue as well as expenditures that were higher than the past. And that's now, I will say that in the past we have had the city controller, both the current one, Kenneth Mejia, and the prior one, go through a detailed presentations, not necessarily a overall city budget presentation, but it was still of interest in terms of, from the role of the controllers. We didn't have that this year. We instead had a verbal observations by the outgoing chief deputy city controller. And then, of course, we're talking about the issues as part of the panel. So, we do make a point to share the link, the council file, that folks can actually get the budget books and they can go into detail. But okay, that's now. What was the second part to your question?
The goal of the day, the goal of having the day.
Yeah, I think it's mainly just to hear from the folks who touch the city budget. And that starts with the mayor who does the proposal, the CAO, the controller who watches things during the year. Then when it gets to city council, we typically have the chair or vice chair of the city council budget and finance committee. And just basically hear from them, from their experiences. And also we are part of our presentations. You weren't there, so you don't know, but we talk about the process and our involvement, neighbor council's involvement and the importance of that. And then, the last several years, we've had a panel discussion of folks includes folks who are not intimately part of that mayor or CAO process, although they typically have one of the seats at the table. So, this year we had somebody who was formerly with labor unions, and another was with economic development perspective, and then the other was CAO. So and then the other, I'd say at least third, and I would arguably say maybe half the budget day value is the breakout sessions. So where we do list the city services and city budget concerns and input and suggestions from, by regions. And so that really sets we need that as budget advocates to just kind of once a year kind of just get that input and delve that out to our various departmental committees in terms of, getting and it's not the be all end all, because you have the opportunity to provide input all around, but it kicks it off. So those would be the points I would see. And okay.
I'll pass it on. Thank you.
Thank you, Jennifer, and then Tony.
Just for Joanne, I think that the Dunn did a budget 101. That might have been what other board member might have been looking for, that I think was pretty good. All right, so my feedback to Glenn and the rest of the budget advocates, we had 3 from our neighborhood council attend, and we hadn't had any in many, many years. So I was really excited that we had representation. The feedback I got from one of our budget reps was that they wish that regional breakout was longer. So it definitely had value for them. So thank you so much for all the work you guys do to put it together. The next question is, I know Region 4, which is what we're in, is currently vacant. When should I just want to make sure that we don't miss the email communication. When are you anticipating sending out that email for votes?
We don't have an exact time frame, but because we've sent it out in the past, we're kind of waiting for a neighborhood council, at least one neighborhood council, to say, hey, we've approved a budget representative who might be interested in being a candidate. So we've already been through this cycle at least twice before. So it won't be in a week. It may be in a month. I will say that for Region 4, both Van Nuys Neighborhood Council and North NoHo NC had expressed some interest from attendees. So there's 2 likely prospects. If your neighborhood council has some interest, be sure to let us know. So we'll make sure to include them. But so I don't know.
We are, we are appointing a new second budget rep. I just want to make sure that I'm able to get their information to you. It'll be at our meeting next week, so I'll make sure that we get that to you guys.
Plenty of time.
Yeah, really quick. Thanks.
Thank you. Tony, and then Assad.
I put up my hand to support like Jennifer's idea, because of course the budget day or any budget advocates meeting is not continuing education credits for this is what's in the budget. Now we've told you you can go home. It's part of how we actually hopefully have some effect on the future budget, which begins now. Probably should have begun 2 months ago. So I would urge you, if you don't have any budget representatives, even though the election of the advocates has mostly been over, that you make certain you do have 2 budget representatives. Send them to the darn meetings, because I can assure you that if they care and attend those meetings, they will be welcome on departmental investigation teams that have to do the heavy lifting of helping those departments prepare a neighborhood council focused input budget proposal to the mayor, which is what comes next in the fall. So now is actually the time to appoint more budget representatives, even though the election is over. I just want to throw that in there because this is the opportunity for those representatives to be truly active. I know the 2 from the neighborhood council in Panorama City were active, at least partially active last year, and I think it's rewarding. Thank you.
And just to clarify to everyone, the budget advocates serve a 2-year term. This was midway through. This was just only to fill vacancies. So the whole group will be up again next year. So just so you all know that's what we're working on. So we want a full slate of folks, and we've got 2 out of the 12 seats in the valley. We have 2 vacant, 1 in 3 and 1 in 4. That's my pitch, is to help us fill those.
Yeah, but don't let your representatives stay home. Send them back. Is my point. They're needed.
Yeah, and they don't scare them away. They don't have to go to 2 meetings a month of budget advocates. That's not the most important thing by any stretch of the imagination. What's way more important is to be the liaison with your neighborhood council and take what our information and make sure it's brought there, especially if budget advocate can't make it. And also to the 2-way street, bring information from the neighborhood council. If your neighborhood council dealt with a certain issue that city services or budget related, let the neighborhood council budget advocates know that, so we can then share that with our departmental team. And the second part is, yes, sign up for one of the department or more of the departmental teams. That's where the actual work and recommendations that's going to get it. It's going to end up in the mayor's lap and the city council.
Thank you. Assad?
Yes, first I want to thank the budget advocates. I think the organization was very well. The agenda was put well together. Everything was excellent, except I wish they allow more time for the Q&A. There was so many people still waiting to ask questions, but then we were shut down, and because of some time limitation. So hopefully the next year we would allow more time for the Q&A, because there is a lot of people have questions about the budget, and that's the only opportunity to raise the issues and bring back the answers to many of these questions. I mean, I got lucky. I was the first one who asked the question, and my point made it. And there is some motion on the CAO office for the transit divisions, but hopefully next year, longer Q&A for session. Thank you for a job well done. I loved it.
Thanks for the feedback. We definitely have heard that debate. I do want to say that for our schedule, it's a tight schedule for 2 hours, that you've got all these elected officials and other folks plus a panel. 2 hours to fit that all in, and it didn't help that we got a 15-minute late start because the council president was going to momentarily appear and never did. So we were over scheduled. But let me just explain to you and to everyone that there was no open mic Q&A in the schedule at all. That was a decision made by the moderator of the panel, and that's what put us way over time, and why we got a late start with the breakout sessions, which is why they didn't have the full allocation of time that we had allowed for them, which was up to an hour and a half. So it could be incorporated, but the problem is when you give a mic, an open mic, you don't know what's going to come out of the person's mouth. And, you know, for the 5 or 6 people that said something, they were not questions that were, well, first of all, some of them weren't even questions. Some of them were statements. And secondly, the panel had very clearly identified what their area of expertise was. And most of the questions that were asked, you know, I remember one of them was about important issues, but they asked about, you know, public comment at city council meetings. Well, this panel, none of the people on that panel have anything to do with dealing with public comment. So the point is that people need to be adults. They need to be respectful of, you know, what we're trying to accomplish here. And the other thing is that this is being televised. It's being recorded so that we could be proud of the the way making this available to anyone who might be seeing it really throughout the world, because it'll, you know, it's available on the internet. So, you know, that to me, that was, it was not scheduled, it was not planned, it was not authorized. I know people want to ask questions, and we're in the conversation to possibly, you know, just allow questions to be submitted, just don't give a live mic. In other words, if it's a good question and it's relevant to the panelists and their expertise, great. And you know, Bob Blumenfield the year before also opened up for a Q&A, and that went somewhat okay until we got down to somebody who you know, sort of got off topic, whatever. And so that anyway, the point is, for all those reasons, that's what we're juggling.
Thank you, Glenn. Appreciate it.
It's true. Once you give the mic away, it's hard to get it back. Ken, you had another comment or question?
Yeah, I was just going to say that maybe the process ought to be that you submit the written questions in advance to let the board have an opportunity to see what it is that really is relevant. And rather than giving people an open mic, it would say who the person is that gave the question, and you could direct the answer to that person and maybe allow them to respond shortly. But I think that would speed up your process a little bit and get you better questions. Thanks.
Okay.
Yeah, that's what we do in our town halls. And we also say, if we don't get to all the questions, we'll follow up. We'll have the mayor's offer, or whoever the town hall was with, have them follow up. So we are used to that. Just this was a live event, you know, as opposed to Zoom or whatever. But thank you.
Okay. Number 10, items from the floor. Kathy, do you want to read your comment? Kathy Schreiner, Van Nuys.
Yeah, hi.
Hi, Kathy.
Yes, so I just wanted to comment that the Board of Public Works appears to be resuming meetings in Van Nuys. I just happened to look at the agenda on, I guess, Tuesday or Wednesday, and saw that they were meeting this Friday at 10 o'clock in Van Nuys, and it looks like a relatively short meeting, and it was something Vahid had started when they had their first meeting, and it was just a few months ago. It was the very first time Board of Public Works had ever met outside of City Hall. And so, and then when he, transitioned, I don't think that they continued it for a while. And so I'm hoping that this, because since it was the second Friday that they were doing it, and this is the second Friday, so we'll see. But I wanted to just say that I think we should monitor this and try to get people out, because they do take general public comment at the beginning of the meeting. And I, for instance, that the one time I went, I just, talked about native trees and street trees and wanting to have more of that. So we really can talk about anything that Public Works deals with. And as we know, their spectrum is very, very broad. So I just wanted to make sure that people knew about it, and that we could make sure that an audience comes, because that will encourage them hopefully to do that. The day that I was there, I walked out with somebody who had presented, I forget which, sub part of Public Works, and they had never been to Van Nuys, never been to the Van Nuys City Hall. So, I mean, that tells you the reason why it's important.
Very good, thank you. And also, there's a reminder, City Council meets in Van Nuys City Hall the last Friday of each month, unless they're on break. So we should try to attend as well.
Right,
And
we hope they'll do that, because somebody was following up with Council District 6 to make sure they were going to do it in August, and she said, wasn't sure, completely sure, but we'll certainly know by the time of our next VANC meeting. So we'll.
Perfect, thank you. And mark your calendars. Congress of Neighborhoods is Saturday, September 27. So put that on your calendar. And Scott, you wanted to give us an update. Scott Munson wants to give us an update on Department of Water and Power.
Yeah. This will be brief because I don't have all the answers, but a couple of weeks ago, I attended 3 of the 4 virtual meetings on LA 100 plan, which nobody knows anything about. Just a primer that the state passed a bill called SB 100 years ago that said you had to have renewable, 100% renewable by 2045. But our council decided to one-up them, and they want carbon-free by 2035, which requires a lot more building and a quicker time frame. So they completed a report, and I read it, and some other people read it, and we went to these meetings, and they gave a report, and we asked questions. Unfortunately, these meetings are terrible. They're the typical politician ones, I'm embarrassed to say, where you ask the question, you get cut off, they don't answer the question, and they go to the next person. So a lot of us complained, and at the last meeting, they finally said, oh, you can send your questions in. We always had thought we would do that. They mentioned it's on the website, but it's not. So many of us restated our questions and sent them back in, and we're waiting for answers, detailed questions that they probably don't want to talk about. But the crux of it was the state bill, SB 100, will raise your rates, average rates, not your rates. This is just a number, 120% over the next 20 years, more of it in the first 10. And the council motion would be 200%, which is 67% more increase than the other one. There's differences, and I don't want to get into them of what they are, but I'm still waiting for the answers. So are other people. It was very unfortunate. If you look on the DWP website, there's nothing about these meetings. They've been studying this for 2 years, putting together all these notes, and a few of us knew about it, and they were attended by maybe 30 people, 12 of them DWP people, for $100 billion project. Their income is less than $7 billion a year. $100 billion. And that's just since I worked there a long time and was in charge of the planning section for the water system, when you're looking out in the future, all you're doing is using cost per square foot or cost per mile and saying, yeah, but that one will be a little more expensive and we'll add 10%. And you hope for the best until you can get some engineers to come up with a project of what it's going to be. So no one believes those numbers. And the second point is they're worried about half the city can't pay for it. So they're coming up with a plan to provide, they haven't really said it that way, but you can see it, reduced rates, which means someone's got to pay for them. I'm looking at you up there on the screen, so someone's got to do that. So make it short, I'm waiting for the answers to my specific questions. which I knew they may not answer, but luckily I could send them in. And then I'll schedule with Linda a time to give a couple of graphs and a little more details of what's happening. Because you may not know this in just one more minute, Linda. They came out to us in approximately 2015 with a proposed rate increase that started that spring. And we made them tell us, I don't care about averages. We want to know about a low residential, a high, and a middle. What's it going to cost? And you could look at the chart and figure out for yourself. And then what happened was after about 3 years, I looked at it and compared it to my bill and I said, guess what? You guys are way off. So we had them come out and they gave us some gobbledygook and they were going to come back later and the pandemic hit and they never came back. So the point being is they're getting rate increases for the past 6 years without going any public hearings because they have things called pass-throughs, which were started a long time ago because of commodities we couldn't figure out budget for, such as how much water we were going to need to buy or what the cost of oil and gas was going to be because of the OPEC embargoes and things. And now it just covers everything in this green energy stuff. So they're just throwing it in there, whatever it costs, it costs. And we had 4 virtual meetings and that was it. And if you look on the website, LADD, you will not find any reference to it. You had to know to go to down and scroll all the way down to the bottom and go to reports, click on that. And from that, you had to know to go to SLT, which is Strategic Long-Term Resources Plan, which I doubt anybody in this room could have figured out because it took me a while to figure out, except Tony. And then it went to the data. So all I'm saying is there's huge rate increases and the council, well, they passed a motion that I don't want to read tonight that the DWP is violating, but we asked about that too and no answers at this point. So that's it, Linda, if anybody has any questions or whatever.
All right. Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate you for giving us this
But I'll come
eye
back.
opener. Yeah. Burton?
There it is. Okay, real quickly, with National Night Out coming up on August 5th, do we know, is there a list anywhere of where they're going to be holding National Nights Out or Nights Out or neighborhood councils that are supporting some? I had rumor that it was not going to be held. So we were looking for some place that might be open for us to attend.
Studio City's doing one, but I can't remember the name of the park. But they're definitely doing one.
Okay. Anyway, is there any place where it's posted?
Well, I would look at the Studio City Residents Association and also the Neighborhood Council, and one or the other will have it posted.
I meant like a list of where all they're being.
Oh, I don't know.
I can check that one, but anyway, that was my question.
Burton, you might contact the LAPD division in your area, because they're the ones that usually sponsor it in the beginning, and they might co-sponsor with the neighborhood council. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Anna.
Valley Village is also having an event. We've had one for the past 10 years or more. So we're planning ours now.
Thank you. Tony?
Thanks to Scott and all the wonderful guys who have served DWP for decades. Scott used to manage all kinds of things in DWP, including water distribution, who continue to be concerned about the future of the utility and belong to the DWP Associates organization. Scott participates in our first Saturday meeting, so I want to remind everybody here that please, if you haven't done it, put on your agenda for this coming fiscal year. Yes, we support the DWP Neighborhood Council Memorandum of Understanding and wish to join it. If you vote for that with your board, you can go online and record your participation. It's really important. But the first Saturday of every month at 8:30 a.m., I put the link into the chat. So please save the chat with the little 3 dots and make certain that you have the link to that webpage. we have an opportunity to discuss the things like the difference in cost between doing what the original national study was that cost your ratepayer money millions of dollars with National Renewable Energy Laboratory to say, if you want to do it, yes, you can do 100% renewable energy by 2045. And when that report came out, on the day of the press conference, when the report was finally delivered, Mayor Eric Garcetti said, well, why don't we just do it 10 years early? Well, that 10 years early is a disaster in terms of A, cost, and B, actual ability to do it safely, meaning having enough backup power in case the wind and solar fails, because you certainly aren't going to have enough battery storage to handle that problem. So this is something that should be a dinner table discussion, and every month you get at least an opportunity to be part of it and bring that back to your neighborhood council and maybe put that in your land use committee. That's another thing, since nobody is sending us land use cases anymore, I strongly recommend that you broaden your land use committees to include infrastructure like transportation or mobility, because and you can throw DWP in there because that gives you another place to regularly consider these issues. But it's a really, the world is changing. We are seeing Europe fall apart over net zero. We're seeing Canada break up over net zero. We're realizing how impractical it is with still 92% of the world's energy coming from fossil fuels, and India and China creating a new coal plant every time we shut down a gas plant. So we need to be reasonable about this. I'm an advocate for energy divergence and new sources. I'm an advocate for wind and solar, but there's a lot of insanity that's coming from sort of a religious point, and elected officials aren't paying attention to the costs, which will hit all of us after they're no longer in office. So yes, it's a big issue, and come to our Saturday meetings and join the fun. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Joanne, and then Lynn.
Yeah, this is a question for either Tony or Scott, I guess. Does anyone have any idea why DWP is dragging their feet to give the final turn on solar? We've been waiting and waiting, and we put in the panels, and you know, we wanted to do our part for the green energy, but DWP has said that it's installed correctly, but they haven't given us the turn on.
We have, frankly, a problem with our currently dysfunctional city, which has largely to do with budgets and staff, because they didn't allow DWP to have their own civil service department. So we are dependent upon the civil service department in the city to set up the employee eligible list to hire from. That's been an ongoing problem, even though DWP pays for the city to do extra people. You still can't get those lists maintained adequately. So hiring short in supply electrical workers to do things like turn on your power is one of the challenges that DWP faces. And another reason it's going to be, frankly, impossible for them to do this 100% green by 2035. So a lot of this part is the city not recognizing realistic limits on its political aspirations. I'm not against the aspirations. I'm for a bigger degree of realism. And it's, I think the fires are part of realizing that the city has a lot of practical things to do, that we need to face the tough challenges. That's one of them. Thanks.
People have been out here and said everything's fine. So I would think it's a clerical thing. I mean, actually our solar is working. It's just the sellback isn't functional. So they haven't given us the okay because for some reason they haven't gotten around to determining how to make it functional. I don't know how they do that.
Like anything in the city, the squeaky wheel gets the grease. Stay on them, keep on calling. Go to the DWP website. You'll find out the people in their community organization that are your local DWP representatives. Another reason to participate in the MOU. They will be able to sometimes fast track things for you. So yes, but just like anything else in the city, whether it's medians or anything else, keep on the issue, because this is going to be several years of us trying to get the service that we deserve, but won't have because of labor shortages everywhere.
Okay, thank you. I'll do that.
Len,
There we
you
are.
mean,
I'm quite certain that neither Scott nor Tony has an answer to this, but you might, if one of your meetings, inquire as to how much higher the rate increases are going to be if the tax incentives are in fact allowed to expire, as is in this last bill that was passed that our president signed. Fortunately, they didn't put in an excise tax on all of the material needed to produce the non-gas, oil, or coal-fired electricity, which leaves us with a few other things. But I guess the main thing has to do with the tax incentives that were there for wind and solar, and those are on the way to going away. They're going to disappear, which will make the, if they keep building the fields, it will make it that much more expensive. And the majority of panels still come from China, and those are going to go up in cost because of the tariffs. So I think the 200% by 2035 is a low figure at this time. I think it may be even more than that, but somebody might inquire of the geniuses that are working on this. That's all.
Thanks,
They don't
Len.
respond really well. But they did say something, they cut it off at a date because, as you know, you can't keep changing things. So I think somebody said that they realized that there are certain things may change if certain bills pass. And that was all I heard.
Well, let
So
me
I
actually
think
just
you're
say
right,
on this, Lynn, there is an answer, and that is the amount of political control of DWP, since, you know, the entire DWP board has an unsigned, undated resignation letter in the mayor's top drawer desk.
I'm familiar with those.
And so the problem is DWP is somewhat limited, as at the sessions that Scott was so frustrated about, in telling the public the truth. I hate to say it, but this is part of the political control of what's supposed to be an independent business. That's why it's an independent business. So the reason we are the only group to have an MOU with a department, DWP, is that they realize that neighborhood councils are able to say things to the public that they can't. So it is really critical for neighborhood councils to get the information on what the real costs are going to be and to take it back to our communities, because only when we start agitating about this will this become something widespread knowledge that elected officials keep getting asked about, and they can't duck the issue anymore. As long as it's being swept under the carpet, we're going to have a problem. So I think it's really important to participate in the MOU. Thanks a lot.
Gary?
I attend DWP MOU as often as I can, which is probably at least more than half. And Fred Pickle, who is since retired, there's a replacement now. I never heard him talk about a 20% increase. What I did hear was 3 to 5 or 4 to 5 times the electric rate that we currently pay now. And I didn't hear that tonight. I'm a little concerned because with all the homelessness and the billion-dollar deficit and everything that's happening in this city, that's the last thing that this city needs, is to drive people out of their own homes. So can we get that number considered with what Fred Pickle used to say, please?
Well,
Tim O'Connor, who is the new ratepayer advocate, as I said in chat, be prepared. He has a work background as an advocate for renewable energy. So I'm keeping an open mind. I spent about 2 hours with him. He seems a very reasonable guy. He does want to make his Office of Public Accountability website more friendly to the public and do more outreach to the public himself. So that's good. But I think that this is part of getting your voice in with the ratepayer advocate as well as with the elected officials, because we've got a new person who's supposed to represent our interests, and we need to pressure him to make certain he actually does in the cost realm. Thanks a lot.
I think it depends on how you look at the numbers. The rates that they showed, current average rate was like 23 or 23 and a half. And the other one was like 71 and a half, which comes out around 205% compared to the current rates. So you have to look at what they're saying they're comparing it to, but those are tremendous numbers. So that's the numbers, and they should be there by, that's their average rate increase that nobody pays. I'm just saying you're going to pay more than that, because if you got the money to pay it, they got to find someone to pay it, and they're looking at ways to do it if you look at their study. So they spent a lot of time on that.
The real answer
Those
to
are the
this,
numbers out of the report.
the real answer to this is not to do the Eric Garcetti rush to 2035 instead of 45. The study was really done to match the state's objective. And number two, they're currently on a preferred extra green, politically desirable method of doing it, which will cost far more money. But we could be on the SB 100, which is the state law. That's what it's mandated for. The SB 100 2045 bill would be the cheapest of all the cost options that were shown in those presentations. For example, you can use renewable energy credits and still burn some gas. So at any rate, the SB 100 and 2045 are the keys to making this plan reasonable. But until we can get people advocating for them, we're still going to be stuck on the do it earlier than we actually can and do it more expensive than we need to.
Cindy wants to remind everyone that plan check is this Saturday, 10 a.m. And the details are actually on the agenda. And we'll go on to number 11, Neighborhood Council anniversaries. Van Nuys, 23 years, congratulations. Porter Ranch, 22 years, and Winnetka, 22 years. And I want to finish off with thank you. Thank you for what you do for your neighborhood councils, for the community, for the city of Los Angeles. And I really, really, really appreciate your attendance. There's still 33 members on this call this evening, and it's almost 10 o'clock. So I really appreciate your participation. There isn't a meeting that we have that I don't learn something. So I really appreciate us getting together and thinking and planning and plotting. So I appreciate that. Thank you so much. And with that, I guess I'll say good night. Unless, hey, Scott Schmerlson, I didn't see you. Did you want to say something?
Not a thing. I'm just fascinated by the conversation.
Okay, great. Thank you so much for attending. Okay,
My
good
pleasure.
night, everybody.
My pleasure. Thank you. Thank you.
Good night, everybody. Good night, Linda.
Good night.
And Linda, if Jeff didn't, I said